right, let's find out where everybody's at. Anybody? I know we got Iowa here, right? Iowa, Bettendorf, Iowa, and Buffalo. Where else? Anybody else? Shout it out. Where are you at? San Diego, long ways away. Anybody else? New York? Charleston, love that town. Anybody else? Where else we got? Here, how about you guys? Jacksonville. Anybody from Texas? The Lone Star State? Okay. A few from Texas. How about Georgia? Just Georgia? Atlanta area? Come on, somebody help me out here. Anybody else? Colorado. Where else? Kentucky. All right. Good. And let's see who the room is too. How many of you all have little kids? We'll call little kids 10 and under. 10 and under. Okay, Ashley. All right, there. Okay, by the way, my daughter is named Ashley, so I like you already. Okay, so raise it again, 10 and under. All right, look around the room, guys. You might want to be talking to these other people. Okay, so 10 to 18. 10 to 18. Raise them up high, okay? And now adult kids, 18 and beyond. Anybody got grandkids in the room here? Grandkids? All right, good. Anybody got great grandkids? Great. So, yep, she's got great grandkids in the back. All right. There you go. This is going to be helpful as we go along. So, my name is Bill High. I practiced law for about 12 years. You guys are doctors, right? So, sometimes doctors and lawyers don't have the best relationship. I was on the defense side, okay? So, I'm okay. You can come talk to me. And by the way, when I was leaving the practice of law, my best clients, now a lot of the work that I did was big, major corporate litigation. And so my biggest and best client, they came to me as like, so I'm leaving the practice, and I practiced for 12 years, by the way. A big law firm, all kinds of stuff. But my biggest and best client came to me and they said, hey, you cannot leave the practice of law. I'm like, why not? I mean, I got this new deal. I've got calling. I'm going to go help people. And like, no, you don't get it. You can't leave the practice of law. And I'm like, why not? And they're like, well, you have the best lawyer name ever, Bill High. Okay, some of you guys need some help on that one, right? Okay, at a break, you can come up and talk to me about that. So let me add on. Yeah, some of you guys are starting to get it now. Okay, so my daughter, by the way, she came up to me once and she's like, hey, you need to add on to that. And she found a lawyer in California that had graduated from a California law school, and she said, you need to add this to your little shtick. And this, you know, I'm half Japanese, by the way, so I can do this, okay? This is appropriate. She'd graduated from California Law School, a lot of Asians in California, okay? And her name happened to be Sue Yu. So we could be Bill High and Sue Yu. Okay, so there you go. All right, so that's a little bit about me. Practiced law, 12 years, big law firm, and then ended up going into the charitable foundation world, began working with families on helping them be able to give money away strategically. Donor advised funds, a whole bit. A lot of income tax planning related to that kind of giving, setting up foundations, but helping families begin to have real discussions around the idea of what does it look like to be generous. As I started doing that work, I had families who started coming to me and they're like, hey, this is really good stuff, but we need help with our family. We don't need a lawyer, accountant, anybody. We don't need any of that stuff. We just need somebody to help us with our family because we're getting kids that are getting married. We have in-laws who feel like outlaws. We don't know how to succeed. Now, some of you with the little kids, I don't know if you appreciate this idea, but you're in that phase of life where like things are spinning so fast. School activities, you're going here and there. Some of you guys are shaking your heads. And then before you know it, they'll be walking down the aisle at graduation, and you're going to say this. You're going to say, wow, that went so fast. I wish I could corral these moments right now, make something meaningful out of them. Now, some of you are already there. Some of you got adult kids, and you're asking, how do I put the toothpaste back in the tube? Something doesn't feel right. Could we become what? More intentional, like Don just talked about. You want that. How do we do that? Now, I'm going to ask this question in just a moment. So if you open up your workbook, turn to page 1, and I'm going to give you some framework for where we're going. But here's the basic question. I get asked this question all the time to audiences. But how many of you set out to have a family, get married, have kids, whatever the case would be? Do we have any singles in here, by the way? Any people that are single? Okay, good. Single person back there. But any of you get out and get started and say, man, I'm going to get married and I'm going to screw up my kids? Anybody? No, of course not. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. And if you did, if you said, oh yes, I'm going to get married, have kids, and I'm going to really mess them up, then we need to have you check into somewhere. That's not the goal. Everybody, how many of you, now raise your hands, how many of you want to have a great family? How many of you want to belong to something, to be part of something that's bigger than yourselves? Absolutely. We all want that. So why does it not work? Why does it not work? That's the big question. So for the past 15, 20 years now, I've been able to engage with families. Sometimes I get hired directly as a coach. I come in and I work with families, multi-generational process. I'm meeting with kids, grandkids, the patriarch founders, and we try to put them onto a path where they could succeed from one generation to the next. It's hard work. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why, but the reason why I'm here today is because of that work, but in my own life. I saw it in my own life. My dad is like 8th generation hillbilly from the hills of the Missouri Ozarks. Anybody see the movie Deliverance? Yeah, that's him. You know, he was one of those guys. It was messed up. It was backwards kind of stuff. 8 kids, 3-room log cabin, the whole bit. They're pretty messed up. And then on my mom's side, she was born in Japan. Meets an American hillbilly. She's in Tokyo. Millions of people there. You know, Tokyo comes over after the Korean War, and she comes out in the middle of nowhere. So there we were, and my mom and dad had 6 kids. I was number 5 out of 6. We were dirt poor. And in that experience of growing up like that, it was so dysfunctional that the thing that God put on my heart is that I wanted to have a great family. I started journaling, by the way, when I was like 12, 13 years old, and that was the first thing I journaled is, man, I want to have a great family. I want to be part of something. And so that's what I work for. Been married now 36 years. My wife is Brooke. We have 4 kids, 3 are married, and 4 grandkids now. So there we are. Our oldest grandkid is 9. So we have lots of fun. All right, you ready? So we're ready to dive in here. So if you open up to page 1, let me just give you a little bit of the format for what we're going to do. We're going to have to speed through this, by the way. Normally, this workshop that we do is either a full day or it starts at lunch, ends by lunch the next day. And we give you some time in the evening so you can process. So we're going to have to speed through it. By the way, back in the back of the room, Tom Blaylock and Tamara Broad, they're my colleagues here. As we get into some of our exercise, see them back there? Yeah, wave your hands, guys. They're here to help us. And so they'll be walking around the room as we get into some of the exercises to maybe give you some pointers or some word inputs as we go along. Our goal in our time is that you should be able to walk out of here, much like Dawn, with a vision, mission, and values statement that you can take and implement inside of your family. All right? That's where we're trying to go. But here's the context, and this is where page 1 is. We try to set up this discussion. Every session is with a basic question. This is at the bottom of your page. So we start with a basic question, and then we have a story, and then we go to this place of a little bit of a proverbial statement, and then some teaching. So that's our process on how we go through it. And now flip over to the next page here. The next page, session 1, and here's your question. Right there, session 1. You see that question? Why do we do this thing called family? So if you got a pen, just write a few things in there. Why do we do this thing called family? What's the purpose of this thing called family? Because let me suggest to you in a minute here, the big thing about this idea of family is that we've messed up this idea of what family is really, truly supposed to be. So what is this thing called family and why do we do it? So All right, a little bit of audience participation. Why do we do that? What's the purpose of this thing called family? Ashley, since you're the only one I know your name, why do we do this thing called family? What's the purpose of family? Give me something, just anything. Yeah, pretty good. Unconditional love, memory, support. What else? What do you guys say here on the front row here? Okay, don't come up to this guy. What'd you say here? Yeah, growth. Yeah, social construct for survival, actually, yes. I mean, if we don't reproduce, the species doesn't carry on, right? I mean, that's like really basic, but that's a very good doctor answer. Okay, what else? Anybody else? Yes, over here. Sharing values, absolutely. What else? What do you guys say? Security, safety is one that we'll have to see, and guidance. Anybody else? How about you guys over here? Get something? Connection, sure, that idea of community. Anybody? In the back. Anybody from the back? What do you say? Why do we do this thing called family? Identity. What do you mean by identity? To belong to something, to be part of something. Yes. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else? How about you here? Yeah, hands crossed there. Same thing, okay, all right. Anything else? Anybody else? Any other thoughts here? How about over here? Enjoyment, okay, give me that. Give me some more. What do you mean by enjoyment of life? Totally. Yeah, all right, maybe one more. This side of the room, yes. Place to make kids, absolutely. Okay, so here we go. Why do we do this thing called family? Now, I'm going to tell you that right up front that the framework that I operate off of is really this idea of a biblical framework, and some of that comes from a historical context. So my faith informs what I do. On the other hand, let me say that I've also studied this area enough. There are people who study this concept of family from a sociological perspective, from a historical perspective, and the answers are still the same. So let me give you a prelude to this. Anybody have an idea the oldest family-owned business in the world? Anybody? Anybody have an idea? Anybody heard of it? Not the Rothschilds, but good guess, very good guess. We're going to talk about the Rothschilds in a little bit, but it's actually a construction company in Japan, and they made it 1,400 years, like 50 generations that they made it. 1,400 years. It's a construction company called Kongo Gumi. They started out building Buddhist temples. Oddly enough, the second oldest company in the world is also a company in Japan, which is a hotel. We don't appreciate this idea of longevity here in the United States as much, but here we go. So here's the concept. So if you see it, what does the Bible tell us? So here's a Bible verse. It's there in your materials, so let's read it together. And it says, and when he departed from there, this is a great family legacy kind of discussion. It says, when he departed from there, he met Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him, and he greeted him and said to him, is your heart true to my heart as mine is yours? And Jehonadab answered, it is. Jehu said, if it is, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand. And Jehu took him up in the chariot, and he said, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he had him ride in his chariot, and when he came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained to Ahab in Samaria. Okay, we can stop there. And that means absolutely nothing, doesn't it? You read that and you think, who cares? What is that all about? That doesn't make any sense. And all it really starts to do is to lay the foundation for, there's a king named Jehu. He's going to come in, and the kings of the day did. They had to wipe out the previous king, and the previous king was a bad king. He had a lot of sons. I mean, the reign was going to last for a long time. So Jehu's the guy to bring deliverance. But as he's going along, he sees this little guy named Jonadab, and he says, hey, buddy, are you with me? Do you want to go with me and help bring good and restore order to the land? That's it. That's all that you hear about this little guy named Jonadab, son of Rechab. It's one of those Bible passages that if you read the Bible, you're like, who cares? What is that all about? And so you actually, anybody Paul Harvey fans? The rest of the story, okay? You have to go actually fast forward into a whole nother part of the Bible, Jeremiah chapter 35. And you end up reading this passage of Scripture, which is, it's also a bad time. Israel has fallen away. They are no longer faithful. There's this prophet, Jeremiah, and he's saying, hey, I wonder if anybody's still faithful. I wonder if anybody is still hanging in there. And God says, hey, bring in the Rechabites. Now that should ring a bell, the Rechabites. Bring in the Rechabites, set before them wine to drink. The Rechabites come in and they walk in, they say, hey, wait a minute. We don't drink wine, and we don't live in houses. We don't plant vineyards. We're not farmers. We're nomads. We live in tents. And why? And this is the punchline. Because our forefather, Jonadab, son of Rechab, said, don't do this. Live this way, don't live this way. So in between Jeremiah chapter 35 and then 2 Kings chapter 10, you ask the question, how many years had gone by? 250 years. Between a dad and a mom saying, we're going to live this way, not this way. And that's your first fill in the blank. So it goes to this idea. Family is meant to be multi-generational. Family's meant to be multi-generational. So if there is one thing that you walk away from with in this entire first session is this simple idea. Family's meant to be multi-generational. This is not only a concept from the Bible, but is a historical concept. Some of you guys talked about this idea of support and care, passing on values. Some of you guys that are from countries that whether it's a Latin America country, this idea of being generational in nature, it is the first way, the social construct on how you impact the world, is if your family succeeds in passing on a set of values to your kids, who pass on a set of values to their kids. That's how cultures not only preserve themselves, but they attract others. That's your first big idea. Family's meant to be multi-generational. Again, just like I started with, the oldest family-owned business in the world, 1,400 years. That's the concept around the world that today we don't appreciate in America quite as much. All right, so I'm going to stop you in different times and I'm going to ask you this question. What's the purpose of family? Family is meant to be what? Okay, yeah, you're going to shout that out, right? Family's meant to be what? There you go. That's the concept. Think about it. If your life, your impact on your kids, your grandkids, it's meant to be generations. That's the way we impact the world. Okay, you got it? So let me take you through where some of these ideas go. So here's the concept. This is the historical view of what we see around the world. Around the world, families truly are intergenerational and interdependent. Intergenerational and interdependent. So it's across generations. Aunts and uncles participate. There's a book out there, New York Times bestseller, Hunt, Gather, Parent. And it's a woman who talks about why does America have so much trouble with discipline of kids, whereas other countries don't. It's because of this intergenerational nature. We kind of all raise our kids together, aunts, uncles. You can point out, hey, you probably shouldn't do that because mom and dad are going to hear about it. And I saw it too. That's a very different idea than what we appreciate. We're the hover generation. We're the nuclear family. And it's this idea of interdependence. We're going to focus on that in just here in a moment. But it really is this idea, children are raised in community. The idea of the nuclear family is something that's pretty new in our world today. Let me go on, I'll get to it. In the U.S. and really around the world, families started as a commonwealth. What I mean by that, the commonwealth idea is that the religious, educational, social, and economic life were combined. Think about the pilgrims coming here. It was the idea that the family was the economy. You had to have a lot of kids so you could farm. You were the social life. You were the fun on the Saturday, but you were also the religious and educational. We needed one another. It wasn't really about until the time of the Industrial Revolution that we started seeing the growth of the nuclear family. And this is this idea here, it's the family bell curve. I don't know if some of you guys, anybody studied the rise and fall of nations? Rise and fall of nations. It's a pretty common idea out there, but it's this idea, like even with America, we start out very interdependent. We need one another. And then as the nation grows, World War II is the place where America achieved dominance. And they began to achieve economic power. But as you achieve that power, you begin actually a series of declines. And part of that decline is this place where you achieve financial wealth. And it's when you achieve financial wealth that everybody can go off and do their own thing. It's the rise of individualism. So here's what happens. The same thing happens inside of families. We start out, all of us, get married, little kids, and it's like all hands on deck, right? You know, kids have got to get fed, diapers got to get changed. We got to take shifts. Sometimes we're outnumbered, but we need one another. But as you grow, about that age 9, 10 era, kids start to exert some independence. And sometimes we get over that bell curve, and particularly by the teenage years, now they're more peer-oriented. And it's at that point of independence, family actually starts to experience some breakup. Before you know it, they are out the door. So for you all with adult kids, now you're back at this place and saying, how do we achieve interdependence by choice versus necessity? This is to some of your question, Ashley. How do we get there where we say this is really important? So here's a couple other facts here for you. In the Industrial Revolution, that's where the nuclear family came. The Atlantic, by the way, wrote a great article that talked about the nuclear family was a mistake. And it's all about this idea that of just you guys sitting there at the dinner table just by yourselves. That wasn't the design. The community was the design. But even by the 60s, 72% of families were nuclear families. Two parents, kids sitting around the dinner table. So still a good thing, but today it's 45%. You want to ask yourself the question, why are we struggling today in our world? Because we've lost that, somebody said it, the sense of identity. It's a sense of community. Anytime you get to a place of that hyper-individualistic state where we're more in tune with our social media, anxiety increases. We don't belong anymore. The modern family, it really is this. It's the rise of individuals over community. Kids come with a price, so don't have too many. You shouldn't have more than 2 kids, because have you thought about college? College costs a lot. This really is the modern view of family today. Don't have too many kids. They cost a lot. And we should be fun, but we sure shouldn't be very intentional. That was Don's big word. It's being intentional with the family. So ironically enough, here we are in a place where you all, a room full of achievers, doctors, who go out there and are very focused on careers, getting the education to establish a practice. That practice builds a particular culture. You work towards customer satisfaction, making sure you take care of your people. And there's a lot of intention in the career, but very little intention on the family side. Less energy, you come home, you're tired, and the family gets the leftovers. And that's where we're at today. And part of the mindset, by the way, it's that last point, is that we raise our kids up to independence, and then we kick them out so we can retire and play golf. I call it you raise them up and kick them out so you can quit. By the way, 1962, Time Man of the Year. You know who it was? Anybody have an idea back to then? Probably not. A guy named Del Webb. You know who Del Webb is? Invented the retirement community. Okay, if you go, you're right here in Florida, right? Go into Florida, you go into Phoenix, Del Webb Retirement Communities. 1962 Time Man of the Year, and the idea was, hey, you know what? You worked really hard, so get out of Ohio and come here to Florida and you just do your thing. So what happens to our culture, guys, when we take the grandparents, great-grandparents out of family life? We take the chief storytellers away from the family. That's one reason why we saw the decline of the family that we did. Okay, so here's the last couple big principles, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of break here. Here's the couple things here that I'd like to, well, let me give you this. The modern, I'm sorry, you're right. Two big principles. The first big principle is this idea that you should look at your family with a generational lens. Look at your family with a generational lens. And I say that, hopefully what this does for you is it gives you a greater sense of responsibility. You're not done just because you got your kid off the payroll. That's one of the things that you hear, right? Kids off the payroll now. The responsibility to continue to grow and educate and be part of the family life is just as important. And we're not done just with our kids, but it's this idea that we get to participate with our grandkids. Part of that community idea. One of the famous lines about being a grandparent, I'm one. What's the line? You know, what's the best thing about grandkids? The best thing about grandkids is that you get to give them back. And that's that we're not really participating, but it's that you should be part of that. Second big principle, it really is this idea of generational responsibility. So again, if you take a step back and you look around the world today, you go into Europe, the mindset was that you have a responsibility to the generations to come. So let me close with this thought as an illustration, and then we're going to take a break. So the story goes, the story about a guy in Japan, and the story is that every day he walks to work, same path, same route, but as he's walking to work every day, he looks over and there's a field, and in the field there is a man cleaning rocks from the field, picking up rocks, taking them to the side of the field, picking up rocks, taking them to the side of the field. Every day, that goes on. Going to work every single day for a year. Year two, same thing. Guy's always picking up rocks, taking them to the side of the field. So one day, finally, curiosity gets enough of him, and he stops and he asks the man, he says, "What are you doing? I see you doing this same thing every day, picking up rocks, carrying them to the side of the field. You never plant a crop. You never plant the seeds, seek to harvest." And the man says to him, he says, "I am clearing this field for my grandchildren so that they can plant." That's the kind of mindset that we should be thinking about. A generational responsibility on how we can make the future generation better off. Okay, let me close again. Family's meant to be what? Multi-generational. All right, let's take about a 10-minute break and we'll come back, all right? This guy over here, I'm from Kansas City. Okay, so the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, for those of you who don't follow sports. And this guy over here, he's like, yeah, Taylor Swift against the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, what kind of comment is that? Come on. So, all right. Anybody rooting for the Chiefs? They've kind of like become the villains now, the NFL, since they've won a couple of Super Bowls. So this guy up here, by the way, is from Wyoming, and you're doing general surgery, right? Okay, so surgery. So when I was still practicing law, I ended up defending a doctor who had done surgery on a guy. And the way the story came about is this guy was small-time crook. and had gone into a doctor's office to steal drugs so he could sell them, okay? So he goes in and he gets caught, of course, gets thrown into the local county jail. But this guy comes up with the bright idea that he's going to steal a fork or a spoon out of the cafeteria and manages to chink out the mortar around some of these concrete blocks. That's how the jail was built. So anyway, they do this, and they end up knocking out a couple blocks, and they knew that they were up 2 stories. So what they did is they got bed sheets, and they threw them out, and problem was that they were a story short on the bed sheets. So notwithstanding, that didn't stop them, and so they climbed down, and they dropped the last story. Well, the one guy fractures his ankle, horrible, fractures his ankle, and he's hobbling along. Of course, they get caught, and he has to get taken to the hospital, and the surgeon does surgery on him, and it's bad. You know, he needs pins and everything. But he sues the doctor for improper surgery because he would intentionally go into the shower and let his graft rot because it was better to be in the infirmary. But then he sues the doctor. Well, we won, but we had to take the case all the way up on appeal to the 8th Circuit. That's how your tax dollars got spent. So he also sued the jail, too, by the way, the county, for improper design. They should have envisioned that somebody was going to escape from the jail. So there's my surgery story. Okay? All right, so back to it here. I want to come back. Somebody appropriately reminded me. Here are the blanks from session 1 that we did not fill in. Okay? There you go. So let's redefine family. Let's redefine family as the first human institution whose purpose is to communicate values because values preserve culture, which creates impact for future generations. That's the idea. So your mission should be to think and plan generationally. And all we want to do with that definition is take it out of the cultural definition that we've allowed to happen today, which is family's kind of fun and it's a place where there's love and support, but we're not very intentional about it. This definition puts it in the context of where we belong and where it began, which family is an institution. It's got a job to do, which is to teach values, because when we teach values, that's our first way to preserve culture, and then we impact the world for generations to come. I can give you real stories of whole family cultures around the world, faith and non-faith, that are able to succeed for thousands of years because they do this intentionally. They teach values. Okay? So, there's our definition. Does that help? All right. One other thing, too, that as we head into session 2, this idea of legacy, we've used this term, Don's used the term, I've used the term. When we think about our legacy, this is worth writing down. So, got out your pen, write down this idea. You've heard the term legacy is what we leave behind. Don't write that part down. The legacy, and by the way, so some of you guys are hospitals or universities, and you get into plan giving, and they say do a will or trust and leave a legacy. That's not that exciting. Nobody likes to meet with a lawyer about their estate plan. But this is a better definition of legacy. Legacy is what we put in motion. That's what you should write down. Legacy is what we put in motion. Or sometimes another way of saying that is, what are you instilling or building into your children that will carry on for generations to come? Okay? Legacy is what we put in motion. One of the other things, sometimes we do this as a whole separate slide, but legacy is not neutral. Legacy is something that everybody has. You're all going to have a legacy. Individually, legacy is not dependent upon having kids. People will look at your life and they'll say, yeah, they really made a difference. They made a difference in my life and the people around them. John Wooden is one of the most famous decorated basketball coaches of all time. And this gets into this next part. But you know, one of the things that happened with John Wooden is that his father gave him a creed, a set of values to live by. It was an old, worn-out paper that John Wooden put in his wallet. He'd pull that out and say, "This is how I live." And that's what this next session is about. So session 2 is this question about why do we drift? So we start out with this question, this big question, okay, what's the purpose of family? And Ashley, what do we know that definitely? What's the purpose of family? It's to be multi-generational. So if family's meant to be multi-generational, the big question then is, why do we drift? Your kids are 8 and 10, right? You said it earlier, and they're not getting it. They're not feeling it. Why are we not there? Or maybe you got adult kids, you got a kid off the rails. It's not uncommon in the families that I coach where we walk in and there's like a kid doing really well, knocking it out of the park. And then there's a kid that's like climbing rocks in Colorado. Nothing wrong with climbing rocks, just no drive, no incentive. And then a third kid that really does have some problems. And we see that all the time, and we ask ourselves, what happened? We worked so hard, right? We're trying really hard, and it just didn't seem to work. Why do we drift? Why do we start to break apart? When we do a full workshop like this, that second session that we do is often we turn to actually family communication, the basic ideas of family communication. We're going to go straight into a values section here right now. But I do want to, somebody brought up the Rothschild family. How many years has the Rothschild family been going on? Like 1780s, I think, is when the Rothschild family was formed. Now, there's some conspiracy theories around the Rothschild family. But one of the things that we know, this is free, by the way, okay? So I'm just throwing this in here. When Meyer Rothschild died, he had 5 sons. He sent them out throughout Europe. And the goal was to have them be a banking empire. But when he was dying, he had these 5 sons, and they'd actually already built up some considerable wealth. But there was one thing that he said to his 5 sons. And he said to his oldest son, he said to them this one thing. He said, no matter what you do, keep the family together. Keep the unity of the family together. Keep these values intact. He didn't say, keep the money together. He said, keep the family together. Cornelius Vanderbilt, same time, same era. Vanderbilts, by the way, could have bought out the Rothschild family. The Vanderbilt family did not make it. They at the time were the wealthiest family in the United States, multi-billion-dollar kind of wealth, and they blew it all. 3rd, 4th generation, it was largely gone. The world's largest fortune was gone. Cornelius Vanderbilt, on his deathbed, you know what he said to his oldest son? Keep the money together. Keep the money together. By the way, in the financial planning world, what do? They talk to you about the financial side, not the money or the family side. Rothschild got it right. He said, keep the family together. That's our goal. That's our challenge here. All right, let's dive into this question about why do we drift here. And so in this question here about why do we drift, family is meant to be multi-generational. Why are we not able to keep it all together here? So here's where we're going to go. We're going to end up having you create a values metaphor. So pause on that for a moment. Let me just give you a quick story. So the family so I gave you a few stories in here, but one of the simple illustrations of this, if I walk up to my surgeon guy here from Wyoming, and I tell him my little secret here, my little story about some insider thing about, say, the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's a little paragraph here, and then I ask him to get up and go talk over to that table and whisper it into that ear, and then your table is supposed to communicate it effectively into the next table, pretty soon it gets lost. The message gets lost, and by the time it got over to the end of this room, it's a totally different story, and we're no longer talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. We're talking about something totally different. That happens inside of families. So the family that I've been able to work with is the Hobby Lobby family, kind of regardless of where you recognize where they stand on their beliefs. There is an interesting thing that happened inside of their family. They ended up having to sue the federal government over the Obamacare mandate. They were going to face a fine of $1.3 million per day for not complying with Obamacare. So that is a pretty hefty fine, you could imagine. So they actually had to gather the whole family together, mom, dad, their 3 kids, in-laws. Some of you that have in-laws know what that means. And then they had grandkids in the room as well, with in-laws as well. And they had to make a decision together as a family on what would they do. There were a lot of questions because they could lose the business. Certainly they would lose the business if the ruling came down opposite them. But what was interesting in the story is that the grandkids all said something and they all voted. And so did the second generation, of course, the first generation. But here's the main illustration around that. How did they get 3 generations with in-laws voting for the same course of action? So think about that. Your kids will vote on your values. Your grandkids will vote on your values well. But our biggest issue when we think about values is that we've never clearly articulated what our values are. Now, we're enough around it that we think that our kids could say, oh yeah, they're about this. But if you never clearly articulate them and put them down on paper, Don talked about it, the family crest. You put them up on the wall of your home, and you're talking about them on a day-by-day basis. It is hard from one generation to pick it up to the next. In the family office world, we work with a lot of financial advisors. There's a guy named Dennis Jaffe who's done the research, and he'll tell you that it is the families who clearly articulate vision, mission, and values that succeed from one generation to the next. So if you want to be like the Rothschilds, you want to be a successful family, you all raised your hands and said, we want to be successful, then you will write down and you will clearly articulate what your values are. Okay? Not just a kind of general idea, but you'll be very specific about that. So the first thing that we do in this is that we look at a values definition. This is page 5. Page 5. See the definition of values? Values are the moral and ethical principles of behavior. Now, Ashley over here, she's got kids that are 8 and 10. Yeah, see, I'm just picking up on you all the time here. Okay, so 8 and 10, if she goes home and says, kids, we're going to talk about the moral and ethical principles of behavior. Like, no, what's that mean, Mom? Actually, she probably won't even get there. Like, no way. So what we suggest to families is that you come up with a values metaphor. Okay, so what I mean by a metaphor, it is the thing that represents the thing. And this is one of the simple ways that you begin to teach values. So we see, I think we gave it in your book, it's this idea that you tie it to a concrete object, and here at page 6, you see it, we gave you some metaphors. These are some of the ones that we see families pick. Some families pick the idea that values are like foundations, or values are like the rock, or the rudder. Values are home. Values are the cornerstone. Values are the diamond, the tie. We had one guy from Louisiana. Anybody from Louisiana? Nope, nobody from Louisiana. He picked values are the roux, which is the soup base for gumbo. You know, it's the soup base or the base for so many things that you do. But what is your base by which you talk about your values? And it's the idea that you can, once you have your metaphor, you can say, hey, values are like this, and you can literally hand somebody. We have another family that one of their key moments, I don't know why it turned out this way, but they're walking along the railroad tracks somewhere near their home, and they picked up a railroad tie. So theirs became values are the tie that bind. We had one, I didn't like this one, but his was values are the Google Maps. I think that one might have trouble, in the next 20 years or so. It might not be quite as popular. But you got to have a values metaphor because it's the way that you begin to teach on into the next generation. Hey guys, values, Ashley, are like this. So our family values are the compass settings. That's how we go about ours. So what I'd like you to do there, I'm going to stop for a second. Tamara and Tom will walk around the room. But I just want you to pause for a moment and pick a metaphor that you would use for your own life. So if somebody came up to you guys and said, let's see, where are you guys from again? Where? Hawaii. Okay, they came up to you guys and said, hey, what are your values? You'd say, well, values are like this. Maybe yours is the palm tree, I don't know. But think about something in your own experience that becomes the symbol. We say that families need their artifacts of culture. They need to be able to have something that they can pass on. We've seen families come up with a coin that they give to their kids and say, this is what you'll look at, this is what you keep on the wall of your home. We had a house fire in 1969, and I was able to go back to that house fire and actually salvage wood from that. And we have a little ornament that we made that shows, I went back and repainted it, the colors of the house that it used to be, and it's engraved on there, 1969, to demonstrate the idea of suffering and struggle. But stop, and I'm going to be quiet here. Tom and Tamara will walk around the room and pick a metaphor. If you're here with a spouse, even better, you guys pick it out together. But how would you teach values? What would be your metaphor? Let me be quiet for a moment, and you work on that, and then you're going to write that into your, this is at page 6, you'll see values are like. You're going to write your metaphor in there as what you pick. Okay, you got it? Okay, I'll be quiet. Yeah, you can change your metaphor too as they get older too if you want. Yeah, okay. How about you guys? Hawaii. You did compass? Yeah, all right. Anybody else? How about over here? Home, okay. Roots, yeah, we have roots a lot. Okay, how about over here? Foundation. Keystone, yeah. Over here, how about you guys? This table here, yeah, you guys. Yeah, I like that. I've never heard that one before. That was good. Yeah, all right. Anybody else at the back here? Other ideas? Yeah, right there. You got grandkids, right? I forget where you're from. North Carolina? Yeah, you got, yeah. Yep, okay, good. So those are some basic ways that you start to think about it. Now, let's go a little bit further too with the idea, and this is not in your materials, but this is one of the easy ways that you start thinking about passing on values. When we do a full-blown workshop, we spend quite a bit of time at this. We're not going to spend quite as much time on it. But you know the way that cultures succeed here? This is your next fill in the blank. It is that values are protective and attractive. Values are protective and attractive. So the long-lasting cultures around the world typically pass on their culture, their values, through story. What are the stories? So one of the long-lasting cultures in the world is actually, it's a tribe in Pakistan. And in Pakistan, they're a blonde-haired, blue-eyed tribe. So think about that. They're in the middle of this, it's a Muslim culture surrounding them, and here they are, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed tribe. They have a very different kind of faith. They have their own celebrations. They're very colorful. They're bright. They have a lot of parties, all this kind of stuff. And somehow, for 1,000 years, they managed to sustain their culture in the midst of all these tribes around them that were very different than themselves. So think about that for yourself, by the way. How does a family manage to preserve its culture when everything around them is very different. Okay? So how did they do it? It's because oral culture, they told a lot of stories. So here's your little bit of pause. So again, I'll be quiet here in a minute, but this is the question that we'll ask. What are the 10 stories that your children need to know? What are the 10 stories that your children or your grandchildren need to know about you, your family, marriage, about you growing up? What are the 10 stories that you need to know, that you need to make sure you pass on to them? So I'm going to be quiet in a second, but here's the way that you do it. Is the first thing that you do is you focus upon yourself, your own growing up life, what was formative for you, what was... Usually these stories, by the way, are the formative moments of your life. It is usually some element of maybe a great success that you had, or maybe it was a great struggle that you had. Maybe it was one of your moments of failure. And then maybe it was just one of those fun moments, something that you just got to a great experience. But what are your 10 stories? So you look at yourself first. If you're here with your spouse, or even if you're not here with your spouse, think about things that you've done together, something that was critical for you all. For us, my wife and I, it was when we had a miscarriage. It was after kid number 2, and for a number of years we thought we weren't going to have another kid. We thought we were done. But that moment of loss was one of our big moments in our marriage. And then you think about, if you've got kids that are old enough, is there something formative for your kids that you'd say, this is one of the stories that we want to be able to tell? Okay, so you got it? Got the assignment? What are your 10 stories? Just make a list of them there. Okay, you got it? Okay, how are we doing here? All right, we're going to do a test of your vulnerability here. Okay, I know we've got a couple mics back there, but let's see if some people are willing to share one of their stories quickly. You don't have to do the whole narrative, but some of one of the stories that you would say, this would be something that I would want to pass on to my kids. Somebody who's going to be willing to volunteer. There we are right there. Go ahead and stand up if you would.
I don't know how long of a story you want, but right after I graduated from undergrad, I went on a bicycle trip across the United States with a group from San Diego to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The following spring, the spring break of my freshman year of medical school, my spring break coincided with my undergraduate school's spring break, and the same group that had ridden across country on bicycles took a trip to Florida, and because I had been on that bicycle trip the previous year, I was put in charge of a group of 5 girls that were on the bicycle trip, and I would rotate them. I would stay in the back because I had a mirror. I could see what was happening behind us and call out if a car was coming or that kind of thing. And I would just talk to the girl in front of me, and they would take turns riding in the front, be a windbreak. And that's how I met my wife on spring break, because I had taken a bicycle trip the previous year. And I still bike every day.
Yeah, what a great story. Yeah, good job. All right, somebody up here had one.
Hi guys, I'm Kamlesh. I'm a foreign trained physician who moved here after completing residency, so the story is relevant to what it took for me to get here. And I'm in India and I'm applying for a visa to come here to the US for taking the step 3. There was an exam called clinical skills that you have to come and take it here in the US. And my visa was rejected, so that kills all the hope of ever coming here. Applied a second time because I actually had a coach who was coaching me through the process. Said, oh, there's a mistake, you just apply right away, and rejected again. So there were 2 rejections, and at that time the word was, once you get rejected once, it's over. And so I gave myself, gathered the courage again, and I said, I'm going to apply again, no matter what happens. Already a rejection. So what's the worst can happen? I go there and I get my visa. And, you know, the story is completely different. I'm here so long, so I feel like this would be helpful for my kids to understand that you don't give up trying it. Want it bad?
Yeah, great story. You see how these start to play out? He just capped it off for us. Don't give up, or resilience. That becomes a way to illustrate a value. These are great stories, guys. Anybody else? Who else wants to volunteer? Somebody over here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Akil Patel. I'm an internal medicine physician. One of the stories I'd like to share with my family would be the overarching theme is to whom much is given, much is expected. When I was in my early stages of practice, I had a patient named Elwood, and he would come in with a lot of respiratory symptoms, and we'd run a bunch of tests, and it turned out that he was living in poor quality housing with mold and just terrible plumbing, and that caused me to then go to the city and look for affordable housing for seniors, and eventually led me down a quest to rehouse homeless and low-income individuals. And so it's something that I want to continue for the rest of my life. And you know, I strongly believe to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yeah, very good. So partly where we start going with this is that that story might well represent the value of generosity, for instance. Okay, somebody else here. Somebody else. Who wants to share? Come on, don't be shy. Over here. Here we go.
I'm 31, so I'm a little bit younger, and I'm not a doctor, unfortunately, but I used to fight against community standards. Like, I didn't understand them. I think when you go with the tides, and I know this is something that DLP is big about, but that middle housing and affordable housing, and you really push into that and try to give back, kind of just mentioning that too, that kind of reminds me of it. But I think through my 20s, I've really grown and tried to start to understand that by working with those types of individuals until you see what their spaces are like and what their lives are like and how they have to pack everything up every day and put it in a grocery cart or something like that. It's just a crazy, crazy thought. So I think just trying to help others and give back and really help people transition out of that situation into a better life. I'm out of Columbus, Ohio, which there's a lot of that, and it's not Miami where it's warm, so it's nice to try to help those people as well. So I think just that really resonated me, what that gentleman said over there.
Yeah, very good. That's kind of the step into the other shoes of someone else. Okay, let's do a couple more here. Who's ready? Oh, Ashley.
Hi again, I'm Ashley. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. So I'm from a low SES background and first one in my family to go to college, to undergrad. And I'm an advanced endoscopist, and I decided to do that because when I was in general GI fellowship at Vanderbilt, was talking to one of my co-fellows, and she threw out this idea because we both loved procedures and that ability to sort of intervene and help someone like in the critical moment when they need it, that maybe we should do advanced endoscopy super fellowship, which was going to be a 7th year of training. And I was like, no, like I can't do that. I was pregnant. I was about ready to have my first child, you know, married. And I was like, it's everyone, being my husband and my mom, are asking me, when are you going to get your first job? And so, I was a woman. There was like no women in advanced endoscopy. So I'd never even thought about it until my friend brought it up. And she's like, well, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to apply and we'll see what happens. And I was like, well, if you can do it, I think I can do it too. So I went ahead and applied also. And I somehow was accepted into a really good training program. But it turned out that that training program was quite malignant, like very malignant, and by far the only woman. And there was a lot of problems during that year, and I had an infant at home, and my husband stopped working so that he could take care of the infant, and we were on a fellow's salary, and so it was really a trying year. But I thought about quitting several times, and that was really, other than a swim team when I was 10, that would have been the first thing I ever quit. Oh, I did drop out of a class in college too, one class, and it was for our Indian friends. It was Hindu. So anyway, that's another story. But I want to say that I did finish that advanced fellowship year, and I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I realized that I can do hard things, and I think the values that would pass on to my girls now would be discipline, grit, personal growth, hard work, and really just courage to believing that you can do hard things, and not putting self-limiting beliefs on yourself, and putting yourself out there.
Yep, good job. Give her a big hand. One more. Let's have one more here. Who wants to share here? Yep, come on. I'd like to see one more. Who wants to volunteer? Yep, right over here.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a surgeon up in the Miami of the North, Buffalo. I think raising kids, your concern is that your values will stick. And we live in a society now that's collapsing around us. And you hope that your kids will come to you when they have a question. And now that my kids are older, they're in their 20s, I've begun to share with them the mistakes that I've made. You know, kids look at you as though you're goofy, but you've done everything right. Most of us are docs. They've had a good upbringing. My wife and I have been married forever. Grandparents have been married forever. But if they know that you're not perfect and that you've dropped the ball a few times, I think they're more likely to come to you when they reach a crossroads somewhere that they need some advice. Instead of going to Facebook or some of that nonsense, they might just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Dad, what do you think? You've been there." So I think sharing your flaws at the right time with your kids is critical to keeping that line of communication open.
Yeah, that is right on. That is, in the coaching that I do inside of families, the number one thing. Actually, our Hawaii guy wants to share here. We're going to have one more here. Yep. Yeah, I didn't forget you there. I saw you there. The number one thing that I hear the Gen X world or the millennial world say that they want from their parents is that they would be vulnerable about their mistakes. That's the number one thing I hear from them. Because oftentimes I'm sitting in the middle of the generations, but the younger generation, they don't want to hear about your victories. They want to hear about some of the failures so they can learn from them. It's a powerful thing, what you just said. Okay, you ready?
Hi. I'm a first-generation American from Egyptian parents. And growing up, we were maybe upper middle class, had everything I needed. School was going fine. I was valedictorian. I had a certain SAT score that was going to get me a full ride to college. And then in my senior year, my dad decided we're just going to take the whole family back to Egypt. But they'd raised me as an American. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know my family. I didn't know the culture. So it was just like a complete foreign transplant. And it was very scary. And I ended up having to graduate and run away. And it was tough. Like I would go to the airport, get rejected. I couldn't come back home because I had 2 passports, dual citizenship, mandatory draft in Egypt. And it was rough for a few months trying to eventually get back to what I thought my home was, which was America. And eventually I did. And then I came back here, and now I had nothing, right? My parents weren't with me. I had a brother that helped me for a little bit, but like they wouldn't fill out the FAFSA. They had no money, no way to pay for college. And it was a very trying time, but it kind of taught me a lot about myself. You can have everything set up, you can have it all taken away, but just as a lot of other people have said, if you persist and you kind of stick with it and push through, there's always a way. For me, it happened to be the military. I enlisted, was able to get some college money that way, but regardless, you put enough effort into it, like, you wanted to come here, I wanted to return back here, but if you're it's just a different experience, but something that really affected my life and eventually got me to where I am today.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for being willing to share. Give everybody a big hand. Okay, so one of the reasons why we often encourage people to share like this in front of the group is because at some level, all of us have that lean-in moment when somebody's telling a story. And we want to hear what's going on. Story communicates, but it communicates the emotion. And that's where we start to hold on to what the value is. Because we could lean into the trouble that you had there. We could lean into the failed visa, those kind of things that you get turned down, you get rejected, or your story. The bicycle, man, that sounded like great fun, and, we can see those 5 people behind you, the 5 girls meeting your spouse. That's one of those ones that usually there's these moments of joy like that, meet my spouse. The moment of failure, the moment of rejection, those stories are what grab us. Donald Miller talks about this, the story brand idea. Almost all of you, if we talked about the Star Wars movies, you could come into that one moment where success or failure depends on one point in time, and you lean into that and say, that's something that I'm going to hold on to. This storytelling is so critical. So Ashley, back to you. The kids that are 8 and 10, you got adult kids. One of the simplest ways to begin this discussion about something that you want to pass on, this takes a little bit of work if you got adult kids, but hey, I'd like to tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. And then because you got these written down, you got them in your hip pocket, you can come back and tell that story. And it's the ability of your kids to be able to tell those stories to the next generation. You know what the generational memory loss is? 90%. Your kids will forget 90% of what you've told them. So if you don't give them a hook, some way to hold on to it, the story, it's going to be tough for them to grab onto. 90% generational memory loss. One quick illustration, then I'm going to go on. My wife and I, her grandfather died, and then her dad ended up moving into his dad's house, and then he died. He died there, and we had to go clean out the house. And there was like tons and tons of trash. My wife's grandfather was like in life insurance and highly decorated guy, and he had all these photos. And sometimes there were photos on the wall of people and places. And this is back in the day where they had the little slide projectors. Some of you guys may or may not know what those are. But these little slide projector things. And when we were cleaning out the house, we tried to keep everything that we could that had value, that had some sentimental value. Like this particular house, there was a deed from like 1860s and all this kind of stuff when the house had been first built. But we piled into the garage all these photos, photo frames, some of them that were up on the wall, all the slide projectors, and 90% of it we threw away. And in one particular moment, my daughter, she's like, hey, who are those people in that picture frame? It obviously meant something to them, and we didn't know who was even in the picture frame. And it's like 25% of kids today don't even know who their grandparents are or great-grandparents because we've become such a distant kind of world. So the stories give us a way to say you are connected to something. In the materials, we talk about this guy. He's a Northwestern University president or professor, and he talks about narrative identity. Your kids will feel safer, more secure if they know your stories. If they know that they come from something, that they're part of something. Somebody raised that question earlier. If they know that their identity, they know it often through story. So here's where we go here. Here's the values process. And we're moving up towards lunch. We'll take a break at lunch. But here's the thing that we want you to end up with is 3 to 5 values. This is page 6 in your materials. So we say that we encourage you to end up with 3 kinds of values. An upward value, something that causes us to look up, something that says inspiration, whether that is a faith kind of idea, but something that looks upward, looks beyond yourself. That's the first thing. And then the second one is a relational value, something that is horizontal. So it's not uncommon for us to see people with their two first values being faith and family, as a for instance. Sometimes we'll see some other variations on that. Or it might be the idea of community, but it's something that says we want to connect to one another. And then the third is aspirational values. These are character-driven values. These are things like integrity and honesty, those kind of ideas. But here's where you go. If you turn to page 7, you'll see that I've given you a brainstorming list. So at page 7, this brainstorming list, what you're going to do is first, I'm going to pause a second, and I want you to take a look at that brainstorming list, and I want you to take and circle as many of those as you want. Be liberal here, okay? Be liberal a little bit and circle as many as you want, because after we do that, we'll come back and we'll start to have you narrow down the list, okay? So that's where we start. Brainstorm a bit. You don't have to use the particular words on that list. You may come up with a new word. The other thing that I'd say in terms of formulating this as a set of values is that we encourage the idea of just use one word versus a phrase. Harder to remember a phrase. It's easier to remember a single word. So here you go. I'm going to send you off here. I'm going to be quiet. Look at the brainstorming list and start circling. Got it? Go. Okay, how are we doing here? Everybody got a good list circled? Okay, so you see the next part, by the way. The next part where we want you to go is you're going to take it down to 10. If you're here with your spouse, that might take some negotiation. But take it down to 10, and then ultimately your goal is to get it to 5. It could be 3. Don had 7 because he had the acronym or the statement. Usually what we find is you can have 3 to 5, and that's what people are able to remember. That's able, or it's easier to communicate if you keep it within that range. Take a step back when you start thinking about, hey, where do I go with this? You see Don came up with the family crest. Well, the family crest idea, you think about this as what you mount on the wall of your home. We've got our own little family design that has our vision, mission, values on it. That's what we put on the wall of our home. So that's where you're going. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet again. I'm going to give you that chance to get it down. So start with trying to narrow it down to 10, and then try to get it down to the 5. Okay, it looks like you guys are making pretty good progress here. Who wants to share their 5? You guys willing to share? You want to share your 5? Are you ready yet? No? How about you? You get 5? Okay, so kind of big, overarching. Okay, how about you guys? What do you got?
So I had intention, education, frugality, positivity, intuition is big for me, and I added a 6th one of integrity. I haven't narrowed it down yet.
Okay, so you'll have to get together on that. Anybody else want to share theirs? Buffalo, how about you? You want to share yours? They're going to give you a mic.
Kind of adding what they said, just no compromise, integrity, do the right thing.
Yep, okay. Anybody over here? You guys want to share?
Responsibility, strength, and family.
Okay, you got 3, got it down to 3. All right, very good. Anybody else? Somebody want to go over here? This side of the room can be represented. Our bike ride guy, you want to share yours?
5 F's: faith, family, friends, fun.
All F's. Okay, so I want to make sure I give you enough time. We still got a little bit of time here. So the next part, some of you guys already flipped ahead. So the next part of a way that you can help make it stick. So you saw what Don did. He basically had a statement. But you can come up with an acronym that helps you remember it. Somebody had all G's too, as I recall. Did you had, what were yours? Okay, so you're probably pretty close to where you could come up with an acronym. But here's the way that you help really make it stick, is that for each one word, you have a short statement that describes what that means. Brene Brown talks about this idea, is you want to describe the outcome. So if you imagine you're talking to your kids or grandkids or just trying to live this out in your own life, you have, hey, values are like a compass, or values are like a foundation, and my values are whatever they are, faith, family. Faith, what does that mean to you? Put that short statement. You short word statement. If you can come up with an acronym, great, do that. Come up with that, but don't kill yourself on the acronym, okay? We have some people that go to all kinds of weird lengths to come up with an acronym, and it's just not them. If you do like the bicycle guy and you got, all F's, good for you too. We did come up with an acronym. Our acronym is GASSER. So it's God's Word, Generosity, Adventure, Story, and Restoration. Those are our 5. So I want to just give you enough time to keep working there. The short statement, and then the other couple things that we encourage you to do is to have a story that you tie to it, like your story. Maybe one of your values is resilience or grit, but what's your story? So that way, Ashley, when you go home, you say, hey guys, sometimes you can do it like, hey, we're going to tell you a story. And you do the story first as a way to teach the value. Sometimes you flip it around. By the way, one other thing. This is free. 0 to 5. This is the age of your kids. Of 0 to 5, that's what they call the caretaker stage. You get to just feed them, take care of them. Okay? Make sure they stay alive. 5 to 10 is what they call the, you move into the cop stage. Okay? Don't cross the street, without looking. Don't break your leg, that kind of stuff. And then it's 10 to 18 that is the coaching stage. Now we're standing on the sidelines and we're coaching a little bit. And then they say that 18 plus is the consulting stage. I don't necessarily like that term as much, but the 18 plus is where they're coming to you for advice, and you have to wait till they come to you for it. I like partnership better, that, hey, we're in this together. Anyhow, that's free, all right? So what I want you to work on is the short statement, the story that goes with it, and then in our case, we use a Bible verse. Maybe there's a quote. Maybe there's a famous thing that you want to tie to it, but that's how you teach it, all right? So I'll be quiet and let you work on that. So let me tell you where this goes here. Today, you don't have to be final. You just need to be good enough. Now, some of you are here, too, without spouses, so you may need to take this home and go take it to your spouse and negotiate over what it looks like. But I would say, don't leave this. Don't just stop here and say, good enough. Take it home and finish it off. But the idea of being able to use this inside of the family, so we did this as a beta just with some young couples, no kids. The one couple in particular, they weren't even engaged yet. During the course of us leading this workshop with them, they did get engaged. They ended up coming for round 2. They ultimately got married. So this is a young couple. But what they did is they ended up getting a big plaque that they put their family vision, mission, values on it. And it sat in their apartment. And they'd be sitting there at the dinner table like young couples do. And sometimes they found points of disagreement, things that they weren't agreeing on the other person's behavior. One of their values was generosity. And they look up and say, man, am I being generous to you? So it became a point of accountability for them. They would tell you that it's been one of the most formative things in their marriage. They also came to a decision point in their marriage where the husband got offered a job to go work inside of a housing group inside of inner city Kansas City. And so what they did is they went to this organization that was a nonprofit, and they pulled out their mission, vision, values. And they asked the organization, hey, what are your vision, mission, values? And they could compare. The organization was stunned, by the way, because they're like, wow, this couple actually knows where they're going. But it helped them make the decision that he was going to leave his job. He'd been at this job for like 16 years. He was doing extremely well. Take a lesser pay because it complied or met their vision, mission, values. This is just kind of a normal, everyday couple trying to make their budget work. and they made a decision based on that. So think about what happens then if you are able to do the same thing with your kids or your grandkids and you're able to pass it on. The last illustration of this, before we take a break here, is you go back to that Kongo Gumi construction company based in Japan. This is a Buddhist company. They were 50 generations into it, 1,400 years that they existed as this family-owned business. I forget which generation it was. I think it was maybe the 16th generation. So they've been operating successfully all these years, but they'd never put down in writing the things that they believed. And ultimately, they came up with a creed that represented 16 points of who they were as a company, as a family. Every month, I think it was every month, they would sit down on a Tuesday and they would go over their 16-point creed and they would drill that into, here's who we are as a family, here's who we are as a family business. 1,400 years, simple 16-point creed. It wasn't all this fancy work here that we're trying to do with y'all, vision, mission, values, but that's how they succeeded, and they would tell you that was the thing that kept them together. Family first was one of their big ideals. They kept it going. Now, ultimately, it was like 2006, the business had changed, real estate values had gone down, and they did get bought out by private equity. But even today now, I think actually now they do it weekly. We're on the Tuesday, they get together and they honor the founders for living out the vision, mission, values. Okay, so there's our start here. We're going to take a break here, and you should be able to take a break, go out in the hall, get your break, go use the restroom, and should be able to grab lunch and then come back on here. We still got a couple more big sessions here before we round out your vision, mission, values. All right? Use this as break time. And some of you guys would be having the question about, man, how does this work? And so I wanted Don to spend a little bit of time with you all in terms of how it's working inside of his family. The guys at the back table, they got little kids in that 0 to 5 era, and they're like, man, this is hard, you know. But that's one of the most critical times that you have in terms of really getting this process started. The 0 to 5 in Jewish culture, what they did two things in Jewish culture is they told stories and they emphasized the idea of the Shema. There's God and you're not. That's basically the idea. There's stuff bigger than yourself that you don't realize. That's what they did. Stories and stuff bigger than you. That's what they were focused on. So it is possible to see this, but man, it is hard in today's culture right now because there are so many noises out there. We're competing with social media. I saw it with my own kids growing up. There was stuff that they were into that I didn't know about. I thought we were pretty good parents. But I would say the number one thing that we did really well is we told stories. Man, dinner table was storytelling time. And our kids know the story about how my wife and I met, our first date, stuff that we did when I proposed, all this kind of stuff. They know those stories. I took them back to some of our family legacy sites too, where my dad grew up, 3-room log cabin, the whole bit. So anyway, Don, you ready here? So I wanted you to just spend a little bit of time. Are you on?
You guys hear me now? All right.
So you gave them a little bit of a taste of what you guys do as a family, but get real practical here. You're doing some family meetings, you got vision, mission, values. How's that going? Give us some idea on how you see that starting to stick with your kids.
Yeah, thank you. So as Bill said, really telling stories, having regular open communication is, I think, essential what we're doing at our kids' age today. And the great thing is at this age today, they're in the household, right, where we have their time. We spend a lot of time together, so we have the great benefit of time. So we have a good number of rhythms on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis that just give us structure.
Give us some of those rhythms.
Yeah, so some of the rhythms. So on a daily basis, we have dinner together good number of nights. Sometimes we don't have a format because of kids' sports and so forth. So, to give you an idea, I'm coaching 2 flag football teams right now. We have violin, we have martial arts, we have a middle school basketball team, we have a club basketball team, and swimming. So, a lot of activities going on. So, those happen in the evenings and such. So
you got to fight for that dinner time, though.
yeah, fight for that dinner time. And, sometimes that means we're eating later at night together, and sometimes we're not all eating together, but we're sitting around the table together. Or you just find practical times throughout the week. But we get to sit down at a dinner table Monday through Friday 3 to 4 times. Doesn't happen every day, but happens most days. And then we just do simple rhythms. So at the dinner table, which is one of the basic places to have communication, number one is we start off with prayer, every time. And now at our kids' age, they're leading the prayers and things like that. And then we ask 3 questions a lot of times, and we'll say what did you accomplish today? What are you proud of today? Where did you fail today? What are you grateful for today? Those kinds of questions are very easy questions to ask, right? Some of the comments earlier, are their answers profound every time? No, they're not, right? A lot of times they'll repeat the same stuff they said the day before, and I'm thankful for mom, right? But having that rhythm of communication and trust that gets built by having open communication has been powerful.
Yeah. Let me interject, by the way, because I've got a friend whose kids are a little bit older, 5 boys, and what they ask at the dinner table is she's trying to teach them to communicate about on an emotional level. So hers is how, now, pow, wow. Okay. And the how is, how are you doing? The now is what's happening most immediately. The pow is, did something happen today that hurt? And the wow is, what was great? What's great going on today?
Yep.
So that's their kind of phraseology, which I think is good for older kids
Yeah.
for sure.
I like that. Yeah, so that rhythm at night, rhythm at before bed, again, these are our rhythms, rhythm at night of some sort of Bible story, prayers together, some sort of conversation. I go in again, not always perfect. I have a 2-year-old who's usually in my arm while I'm doing this, but one-on-one conversation with each of the kids before they go to bed, just listening and talking and making sure they know they're loved and. So that's a daily rhythm, and then we've recently really put some structure around a rhythm of Sabbath, of just Saturday evening to Sunday evening of no communication, basically other than who's with us, right? So no being online, no phone calls. No, going and doing Xbox or iPads. We'll watch a movie together or something, or that's fine as long as we're doing things together, right? So we might go biking, we might go outside and go play basketball, go explore somewhere. We're not we can't do anything, but we're doing it together without the distraction of outside communication, and nobody's doing work, right? We're not doing housework generally. We're not, we're just enjoying each other's company. And we may include grandparents or friends or other people on that day with us. But that's just a simple rhythm of just pulling the technology out of the focus and center for a lot of the weekend.
Your oldest is how old?
About to be 12.
About to be 12. Are you thinking ahead to rites of passage? Because I know some families think about that, certain age, kind of like the bar mitzvah kind of idea.
I haven't thought of it exactly in that way. But we are working on certain authorities that they get to have today. Like we don't again, practical stuff. We don't let them have a cell phone, but they have Apple Watches, which is a great alternative in my opinion, because they can only talk to or text the people that you allow in the phone. They can't get the internet on it, but I can get a hold of them anywhere, know where they are, see where they are at any time. So it gives them a certain amount of freedom, but also gives us comfort as they're out and about without us more. So some of the things we do kind of around these things that'll change over time. So now I started a couple years ago, overnight trips with each kid now that they're at this age, right? We do at least once a year, each kid separate one-on-one overnight trips. One of the other speakers that'll be here at the White Coat event, Jim Shields, a good friend of mine, he wrote a book called 18 Summers. And it's on the simple rhythm of, he calls them family board meetings. having a once a quarter meeting with each kid. So the way we do it is we take 5-6 hours with one kid one-on-one, doing whatever they want to do. Again, with no distraction of cell phones or whatnot, and just do that rhythm every quarter, and they look forward to it and they enjoy it, and it's just a blast. And almost every time, amazing conversation that wouldn't have happened otherwise without that space doesn't happen. So we're things like that we're doing, but we haven't got too much into yet any specific rites of passage.
Practical question for you. When's an age where they would get a cell phone?
I don't know. We're gonna delay it as long as possible. I think with the Apple Watch, it gives us and them all the kind of freedom and controls. I really think you want to have cell phones so you can get a hold of them when they're not home, right? And we virtual school our kids. I talked about, so it's a little different. But I'm not planning to do a cell phone anytime soon. Of course, that doesn't mean you can control the internet still, right? No matter what you do, no matter what controls you put on it, once they get to a certain age, 14, 15, 16, they'll figure out how to get around those controls no matter what you try to do. You just hope you've instilled the right values. It's a scary thing, right? That what you can get access to in a couple clicks. But we're not planning cell phone anytime. My wife says 25, I think, is what her answer is when they ask, because it's an almost everyday conversation about a cell phone. Same thing as TV in our bedroom, things like that, that we just try to minimize the distraction, right? I think impulse control, instant gratification, these are challenges that you face with any children's anytime, but today's age is really hard with things like YouTube and social media and whatnot. So Florida just passed a week or two ago, I think. I don't know if it passed or it's about to pass, but a rule that says if you're less than 18, you're not allowed to have a social media account. So it's actually going into state law, which I think is actually a pretty good thing. But we don't allow our kids to have social media accounts, don't plan to anytime in the next number of years.
Yeah. Okay, so real practical question as well. How are you seeing what you've implemented so far sticking with your kids? What's the outward? Give them some encouragement on how you see your kids starting to grab a hold of the idea.
Yeah, so my kids are again 2, 10, 11. So you have to check in with me in 10 or 15 or 20 years if what I'm doing worked or not, or if we made the right decisions. But what I can tell you is we do, even though we homeschool, virtual school, they get lots of exposure in the outside world. They come to work with me most Fridays. They're involved in lots of sports and lots of activities, and so we get to see how they interact, with others, and we see that not always at home, but not at home, that they're respectful, well-adjusted, kind, caring kids, and we hear that all the time. A lot of times the feedback we get, we don't believe it because we see them at home, but what we hear outside of the home is incredibly positive, and we see, even though I joked earlier about my middle son's grit, we see them understanding the concepts of effort. We see, their mindset shifting around, believing that they can grow, and they love the Lord, and that's the biggest thing we're focused on, and have that trust and confidence that in the relationship. So so that's commentary at this point. We won't know for a number of years if it worked, but I can't say it could. Obviously, like many of us, I'm very proud and think that they're great kids and developing well.
Good. All right. Questions? Anybody got a couple of questions? We've got a couple questions, and then we got to start diving back in. You guys may have a question too, like older kids, but anybody got any questions at this stage? Yes, go ahead. You're going to bring you a mic, so that way everybody can hear.
Thanks, Don, for sharing that. I just wonder, with your children, do you ever get the sense that they feel entitled at all in any way? And how do you, with your teacher that travels with you, obviously you've got a lot of experience, which you're fortunate.
Yeah, it's a great question, and when these are the types of things that many of us have to think about, right? That you didn't have to think about when we were kids, or a lot of us, right? That and it's a big factor for me, and something I spend a lot of time thinking about. So so there's decisions that you got to decide what's right for your family, and when it makes sense to, by today's standards, I guess I'll call it, give up certain things for the benefit of not having your kids grow up entitled. So an example, we live in St. Augustine, Florida. and it's a beautiful place. And there's a couple areas in St. Augustine right on the ocean that are beautiful. And these are homes that are 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 million dollars. Gorgeous homes on the ocean. I'd prefer to live on the ocean in a home in these certain areas, but we don't. We live in a nice but normal residential neighborhood, in an average home in the neighborhood, right? And that's a decision that we'd rather our kids grow up in a normal neighborhood and than be kind of isolated in a country club environment, right? I'm not judging anybody else not to make the decision, but that's a decision we've made on purpose for that reason, right? I don't own any Lamborghinis or Ferraris or anything like that. Again, I'm not judging it. I'm just saying I don't. And so he's deciding what those things are, right? So I don't think our kids, really fully yet realize certain things, and that's a good thing, right? And sometimes it can backfire to the other side, and this is where communication comes in. So, example, when my kids started flying private, it was like, then they're telling their friends, hey, are you getting on your plane to go there, or what, things like that. And they thought it was just so normal because they didn't feel it was an entitled thing, right? They just thought it was normal. In fact, more times than not, they were complaining that we weren't on a big plane, that didn't have, whatever, iPads on the airplane, or nobody serving them food or whatever that there'd be on a normal airplane. They thought that they were getting the short end of the stick, right? And had no concept that was an incredible blessing. But so having to have those kind of conversations, say, hey, we don't talk about how we're getting there with our friends. That's just not an important topic, right? And things like that are conversations I never thought of having to have years ago, right? But I other people would have to make the decision. But I think they most would say they don't seem or behave privileged or thinking that they deserve things, right? They have to work for any dollar they get. We don't buy them big, expensive, many thousands of dollars worth of Christmas gifts or birthday gifts, things like that, right? We make them work for whatever they get. And they obviously have some idea. They see that dad is the boss, and we have a big company, and we have multiple houses and things like that. So they, in some sense. But I think so far we'll see when they become teenagers. But so far, I think they're pretty humble at the moment. We'll see though.
Okay, we got time for one more question. Anybody else? Here we go, right over here.
So I just wanted to ask, how do you keep the conversation relevant? I have a son that's 9. I have 2 daughters that are 5 and 3. Obviously, you have an age gap too. It's just, how do you keep a conversation relevant for a 9 or 10-year-old that's still relevant for a 3 or 5-year-old?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if you can with all the conversations, and I don't know, the 3-year-old is going to be able to be, fully engaged. I just say, you just try to do the best we can of choosing conversations that would get people involved, activities that bring them involved, but know that sometimes the younger ones aren't yet going to be ready. But even if they're not paying attention, even if your example having a family meeting and the 3-year-old sitting there on an iPad or coloring or whatever, but's in the room and hearing the conversations, that when he or she's at a point that can absorb it better, it's still the saying, right? More gets caught than taught, right? And seeing and hearing and knowing that this is a safe place and the family communicates and we talk about these things will still pay dividends even when they're not paying attention. Even when my kids have been 8, 9, 10, 11 and they're not really, you don't think they're paying attention, and I'm feeling frustrated, like how are they not paying attention, right? You'll be surprised what they are observing even when they act like they aren't. It'll surprise you and amaze you what they do pick up, especially over time when you keep doing it. But that's it. But my 2-year-old obviously doesn't understand anything we're ever talking about at this point in these regards. But it'll be a couple more years before we're engaging him in any involvement in any of our conversations.
Okay, we're going to have to get Don off the stage here, but give him a big hand. Say thank you to him. Okay, so by the way, to your question about how do you do this, at the early stages, the faster you go, the better, okay? We say the acronym for your family meeting should be FFIA, fast, fun, informative, action-oriented. Fast, fun, informative, action-oriented. When you got little kids, it might be a 10-minute meeting. If you got teenagers, it might be 20 minutes. But don't try to make these too long. I went into one family, and it was run by an engineer, and he would have all-day Saturday meetings going over the financial statements. Now, his kids knew everything, but man, they hated those meetings, all-day financial statement meetings. So he wanted to make sure they knew everything. Don't do that, okay? Stop that. But when can you start? Now. That's when you start. If you got a 7-year-old, Young Americans Bank, they actually have a financial literacy program that starts at age 7. So you need to start now. We oftentimes have families that are so busy that they think, how can we get going here? Man, if all you did was start with, the Team Smith meeting and you chant your mantra. That's what we've got. Some families, that's what they do. We got one that's a homeschool family, and they have a little song around, we're Team Smith, vision, values, mission, and their meeting is like 7 minutes every day. But and they've actually sent me videos of their kids repeating it on their own. But now's the time to start. Now, I'll admit, if you got a 3-year-old, don't just start with 3-year-old. Start with stories and a little bit of the mantra around who you are, okay? If you got adult kids, that's a different question about how you start. Whatever you do, if you got adult kids, don't go home to your adult kids and say, hey guys, I just did this thing with Bill High and we got it figured out now. And we're going to tell you what it is. Don't do that. Bad idea. I've seen disasters come out of that too. With adult kids, you got to do it a little bit differently. You got to invite them into the conversation. Now, the easy thing, by the way, you got a 19-year-old, as I recall, right? The easy thing with the adult kids or the teen kids is you can actually just give them like a piece of paper and say, hey, what do you think are the words that describe our family? What are the words? And then have them work together on coming up. If you got good unity, that's one of the simplest things to do. What are the words? Don't even use the values thing. You can make it really simple by what are the words that describe us, and then start having the conversation around who you are. So that's really simple. This idea of the family meeting is something that is not a brand new idea. Now, the family office world has kind of made it up like it's a big thing, but people have been having family meetings for decades, for hundreds of years, thousands of years. But Don mentioned it, the idea of Sabbath. It's this idea that we're going to take time away from our normal activity, and we're just going to focus in on, we're going to have some food, we're going to have some family, we'll relax, we're going to break away from our normal routine and talk about, again, who we are. That's the simple idea of the family meeting. So we do another workshop, by the way, that is around family culture. And the idea simply of just coming in and calling yourselves Team Smith or something that recognizes that you're a unique family. The onslaught of the world, the way you fight against some of the things that the world is trying to teach your kids, it becomes a lot easier if you're Team Smith and you say, hey, we got these values and we just don't do that. That's not who we are. And that made the biggest difference for our kids to say, look, we are this, and we're not this. And it made all the difference in the world. Okay, you guys ready to jump back in? Ready to go back and do a little bit of work? Okay, so here's where we're at. You should have today, one, what's our purpose of family? Family's meant to be what? Okay, come on, try that one more time. Family's meant to be what? All right, multi-generational. So you have on your shoulders the weight of future generations. That should make you feel good, right? Okay, the kids that you never see or will never see are going to be influenced by you and your spouse for future generations. You impact generations to come. So that's the first thing that we covered. Now you've got a set of values, 3 to 5 values that you can go and articulate. You should have a values metaphor. Hey, values are like a compass. You give a compass to them. Here's our 5 values. What you were all Fs, right? You were all Fs back there, the bicycle guy. So you got your 5 values, you got a short statement, maybe you got an acronym, you got a story, maybe you want to get really adventurous and you want to have a movie. So now you got a conversation piece, and now you can have a family meeting. here's where we're going to go in these next couple hours. So we got to try to get you out of here. These next few sessions are going to move pretty quickly. And these, I'm not going to kid you, these are probably the hardest two upcoming, particularly this next one. So we're going to come up with a family vision statement, okay? And then we're going to go to a family mission statement. Vision and mission, I'll talk about how those are different. And then we're going to end up with, how do you live it out? How do you live out vision, mission, values? What's the first step that you're going to do to take this home and try to implement this at some level, whether for yourself, your spouse, or your kids, grandkids, as the case may be. Okay, you ready? All right, so here we go. This is page 9. And the question here that we have is, why do we quit? So families meant to be multi-generational. And the second part of where we went is sometimes we don't make it because we just don't articulate our values. We drift away because we didn't know what we were actually gathered around. But then this third question is one of the hardest ones. Why do we see people give up? One of the psychological phenomenons going on right now are the number of kids who are cutting off their parents. There's a whole book out there called The Rules of Estrangement. And it talks about this rising number of kids who are growing up in our culture today saying, I'm not even going to associate with you. And you see parents that have not seen their kids for 8 years, 9 years, or forever. And it's typically the kid who is cutting off the parent. I did just a short little session like this at a family conference. 15 minutes, and I had some parents who made a beeline for me, and they talked about their kid who was, frankly, probably one of their favorite kids because he'd call them up and he'd have these long conversations. Then he got married, and his wife said, I like those people very much. They have not talked to him in 4 years. Just totally cut off. And we're seeing that. Why do we see kids, families, to just check out what happened? And so the way that we illustrate this in your book there at page 9, some of you guys perhaps have heard the story of Florence Chadwick. Florence Chadwick was a long-distance swimmer, and she swam the English Channel, did it one way and then did it the other way. I don't know why people would do something like that, but she did. And she was well known for this, for these endurance kind of swims. And one of the ones that she did was from the Catalina Island off the coast of California onto the shoreline of California. And the story goes that as she set out on this swim, which she should have been easily able to do, as the swim was going along, the fog set in, the rain came in, kind of as it would on some of those shoreline coasts. And as she's engaging this swim, she's got trail boats beside her. Her mom's in one of those boats watching for sharks a whole bit. And she's starting to say, I don't think I can make it. And her mom is saying, oh, no, you can do it. You're going to make it. And this thing kind of goes on back and forth. I can't make it. Yes, you can. But it's foggy, cloudy, rainy, all that stuff. I can't make it. Yes, you can. It goes back and forth. And finally she says, no, I can't. She climbs into the boat. She looks out, and she's like a mile and a half from the shoreline. She could have made it. And they stop and they ask Florence, what happened? You should have been able to do this easily. And she said, I couldn't see the shoreline. Couldn't see the shoreline. Now the story goes too, by the way, she comes back a couple of months later, I think it was, and she attempts the same swim. She goes into the swim, same stuff goes on, fog comes in, the whole bit, but she finishes the swim. And they ask her, what made the difference? Why did you complete it the second time but not the first? And she said it was one thing. She kept the shoreline in mind. She kept the shoreline in mind. So the number one thing that you can do for your life, for the lives of your kids, the lives of your grandkids, is to paint the picture of the shoreline. Give them something that they can look forward to. So in your book, we talk about the vision is the picture of the shoreline. That's why you saw Don up here have the family crest. Sometimes we have families that come up with their family picture. We have one family that's deeply engaged into what they would call transforming a city economically, socially, poverty issues. And so their picture is of a city and the idea of a family engaging to the city. So whether you're artistic or not, you have to think about this idea of what picture you are engaging or drawing for your family. So here's your fill in the blank. Vision is the desired future state and goal which defines success. The desired future state and goal which defines success. This, I mentioned this to you earlier, but this is the quote from Dennis Jaffe, and he talks about this idea to be the 100-year family. Jaffe's done the research. Again, whether you agree with any of the stuff, I'm just telling you the research is there. If you have a clear, written down, articulated vision, mission, value statement, you got a better chance of succeeding. And by the way, it's not enough to have it written down. It's that you're communicating it regularly. This is who we are. We're Team Smith. We have this dream of what we want. Our mission is this. Here's our values. To articulate them and attempt to live them out on a day-by-day basis, you got a better chance of succeeding. The research proves it. Jaffe's got all these families that he puts in a book. In Europe, there's a whole societies of families that are still going. You don't get admitted unless you've been a family-owned business for 200 years. A little aside too, by the way. It does help if there's some kind of underlying activity, whether it's a business, a family foundation, but something that the family is engaged in together that says, here's what we're attempting to do. Okay, so your goal, paint the picture. Vision is this ideal future state. It is what I say it's a what only God can do kind of statement. It has to be one of those kind of statements. So if you flip over to the next page, vision is what we say must be hide. Here's your fill in the blanks. It's got to be hard. It's got to be difficult. You look at it and say, I don't know. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure we can do that. That's the next part. It's impossible. You look at it and you say, there's no way. We can't do that. It's just too big. Don talked about it in terms of the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. We're the Smith family, and we want to be the premier family making an impact in Orlando, whatever it is. However you would describe it, but it is this impossible, and it's directional, and it's exciting. So you're only writing a statement that you hope from 150 years from now, the family, kids that you would never have met would look at it and say, wow, I think I want in on that. I want to be part of that family culture. That's the successful family that you're trying to look at. So one other thing, by the way, is we're going to go into mission in the next session, but this is right in your book. Mission is something that's very practical. It is not exciting. A vision statement needs to be something that's exciting. So when you get ready to go in and write your vision statement. Again, I'm going to preface this by saying this is going to be the hardest part for you, but this is where Tamara and Tom will be walking around to help you. It helps to talk out loud, by the way, with others. You got somebody there and say, here's what I'm working on. But the part about mission's not exciting. It's just, here's like my daily instruction. Just do this, just do this, just repeat, 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 and you'll get there. Vision is one of those hard statements like, no way, we can't get it done. All right, let me give you let's do a little bit of a quick illustration here. I need a couple volunteers, okay? So will you come up here? Yeah, thank you for volunteering. Okay, yeah, come on, you two, come on up. I need you to help me. All right, so this is an illustration of vision, all right? So there'll be others too. So here you go. Come right over here, and sir, if you'll stand right here, and you face toward the back wall, all right? Okay, and you face toward the back wall right in front of him, okay? All right, so let's assume that, now this by the way, wouldn't be the classic example, but let's just assume these people cast a vision. So just point like straight to the back wall, okay? We'll use the same hand. Okay, all right, so let's take this guy. They're kind of pointing to you there, okay? You in the back wall. Okay, right there, here. I'm looking at you, but I don't know your name here. Right there, white shirt. Yeah, there you go. Okay, kind of go where they're, stand up and go where they're pointing, okay? Yep, keep going, go back by, all right, stop there. They're pointing there. All right, stop there, all right? So, you can put your arm down for a second. Now, I want you to just pause for a second. Most families actually don't even create that clear a picture. They never point a direction. And so that kid is actually wandering all over around. From a good family, you guys are great people, right? Yeah, they're great people. But most kids are just wandering around because they don't have a picture. So let's assume this family here says, we're going to write a vision statement. Now I want you to take half a step over to my right. Take a half a step over. So now they've written a vision statement, and they're going to implement it. Now I want you to notice something here, by the way. Did she move much? Nope. Not much change here at all. Just a little bit here, shoulder to shoulder. Now, what I want you to do is, yeah, you there with the glasses, help me out. I want you to go now where they're pointing. Yeah, you right here. Yeah. Okay, yeah, now go out there where they're pointing. Okay, you're going to point now here this direction because you've changed directions. Okay? All right. Follow their point. You. Oh, she did. She volunteered. Oh, okay. Okay, there she is. She's following. Yep, right there. Stop there, stop there. Okay. This was just a little bit of change, remember? Not much change at all, but they set a different vision, a 1-degree change, and look at the difference between those 2 points. Huge difference, just a little bit of resetting of the direction. Okay, very good. Have a seat. Thank you, guys. Give them a big hand. That's your idea around what vision is. Vision is the 1-degree change right now, Ashley. Okay? So you can't quit, you can't give up. You have to set the vision. It's the little bit of change makes a big difference a long way out. Let me pause for a second too. Remember in the first session we talked about this idea that you have a generational responsibility. It used to be the way cultures worked, particularly agriculture, families, and the like. We thought in generations. Hey, we're going to clear that field, but it might not be until the next generation or the third generation that we'd actually farm it. So that's how we think. And so you're trying to, even if it might be tough now, you're going to change directions and say, here's the picture, guys. Here's where we're going. Does that make sense? All right, so you ready to work on it? Here's where we go. The vision statement is hard, impossible, exciting, directional, and here's what you start looking for. Is you start looking, here's some sample vision statements of what we've seen people do. One of my favorites there, by the way, is the growing seeds for eternity. That was a farming family. They actually grew seeds for the farming community, brome grass and the like. And so they sold seeds. They were a quiet little family that very introverted. I'd call on them and they're like, we got nothing. But when they got the vision statement, they're like, we got it. Growing seeds for eternity. You see, by the way, there, this, by the way, vision statements, 5 to 7 words. Sometimes we go into the family office world and we see people that are writing these and they're like, oh, we just can't do this because they're too long. You get 5 to 7 words, you can remember it. That last one there is one of my favorite ones too, always mighty in the land. So 5 to 7 words. Sometimes you can consider an acronym. We have one family out of Indiana, and their statement, their last name is Wildman, and so they came up with WILD as their vision statement, World Influencers Living Differently. Now, if your name is like Zakharowski, probably not, okay? But anyhow, you could consider an acronym, but here's the first part. What's your dream for your family in 150 years? I'm going to shut up for like 2 minutes and let you think about what would you like to see. Think about it from a character standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from the standpoint of how many of them are. But what's your dream for your family in 150 years? I'm going to pause. Let you write. Okay, flip over to the next page. I know I'm making you move fast. Different way to ask that question. What would get your family excited? Think about that question again about, you're now talking about grandkids, great-grandkids that you might not ever see. What would get your family excited to be part of? What would they would say, wow, this is really cool. Sometimes, by the way, we see that's the idea of family reunion, the place where everybody's getting together. Sometimes it's the fact that they're building something, making something, that they're part of education, things in the community. What would get your family excited? I'll be quiet and let you write. Yeah. They should be consistent with them, but you may not necessarily repeat the words and the values. Vision statement are often standalone that incorporate the values. His question was, what is the relationship between the values and the vision statement? And all I said simply is that lots of times we'll see for economy, word economy, we won't see the values repeated in the vision statement, but they do reflect the values. If you're a strong family of faith, for instance, then you might well have a vision statement that reflects something about faith. If somebody had the adventure as a value, you might have something that reflects that. Okay, quick pause about what would get your family excited. One of the things that we talk about that you don't want to miss is this idea of the value of place. I've seen this described as the theology of place. There's another guy that I read that he talks about that geography holds the memory. And we've become such a transient culture that sometimes we don't sink our roots deep into a community. We don't have that house, that home. We don't have that one place that we always go back to. Some of you had home as a value. You do see kids in generations sometimes that they articulate a family home with all these memories. So we encourage this idea of how do you cultivate place as a value. Sometimes it is, again, this kind of fits in terms of where you may be at, but it is, do we have a lake home? Or do we have that second place, the retreat place? Or inside of our own family home, our immediate place where we live, was there that one room where the gatherings were? But that idea, this theology of place that we have meaning in the geography makes a big deal because we hold those memories literally inside of our, you guys are doctors, you understand this. Sometimes we hold those things inside of our muscle tissue. That's a big deal. So geography does matter here. This, by the way, a little bit of the thought process for you too. It does make a difference that sometimes you've heard the adage about spread your wings and fly. And you see kids that go take off and they decide they're going to go move to Seattle or wherever because it's got mountains and it's got the sea and all that stuff. And they move away from their family. Well, this idea that if geography holds a memory, this idea of being close to one another makes a big difference. Now, I'm not saying they're supposed to go live in your basement for the rest of your life, okay? Don't hear me saying that. I'm saying this idea that proximity and being able to get together really does make a difference. Okay, pause there here. Now, some of you may be artistically challenged, but this is the next point here. We're all getting ready to lead up to you writing your vision statement. But is there a picture? what picture would you hang in the wall of your house? Or maybe some of you are starting to craft an idea on what the family crest would be. Is there that kind of picture? Is it what shoreline are you going to present that would say, here's who we are, here's where we're going to go? That's the little quick exercise. If you need to draw stick people, go ahead and do that. Some of you are more artistic than that, go for it. Some of you want to do your family crest, but this, by the way, is a good place. Take a look back at your family values, or take a look at some of the ideas you might be percolating on and saying, is there something I could draw? Okay, I'll be quiet and let you take a stab at that one too. Okay, I'm going to stop, pull you back here. Sometimes people get mad at me over that one because they're like, I don't know how to draw. That's okay. Here's where we want to go with this little exercise here. If you turn over to the next page, I'm going to give you some absolute words that you look for in a vision statement. One quick aside, anybody ever see the movie The Astronaut Farmer? No, it wasn't that good a movie. But there was one line in it that was worth it. It's Billy Bob Thornton, and he's in it, and he's like literally a farmer, but at one point he had this dream that he was going to be a NASA guy and go into space. And so he's on his farm, he's like, well, I'm going to build a rocket that can go into outer space. And he's got these teenage kids. His son's going to be the radio guy, and he's got all of his kids involved. But as you would expect, he's starting to run out of money. NASA finds out about it, and they don't like him doing that, so they're going to put a stop to it. But his father-in-law, who is Bruce Dern, comes to his house, and he looks and sees what he's doing, and he turns to Billy Bob Thornton. He says, you are a great father. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm about ready to lose my farm. And he's like, you're a great father. And he says, because you've got your family dreaming. And that's what you want. You just want to get your family dreaming and say, hey, we're part of something. Somebody said it earlier. We've got identity. This is where we're going. Okay, so here's what you're looking for. Page 12. In a vision statement, you usually like to see some kind of either directly or by implication. But absolute words like all, forever, generations, thousands, eternity, world, hundreds, every, never, always, those are the kind of things that you look for. But a short little statement that would use one of those words, maybe a couple, 5 to 7 words, where you'd take a stab at saying, here's the picture that we want to create. All right, so it's about 1:59. This is going to be the longest little bit that I'm going to give you to brainstorm on this one. But hey, you're a group of doctors, so you could get it really simple, like all people healed. Everywhere, all people healed. I don't know, something, those are the kind of how you start thinking about it. Let's play with the words, knowing that you want an absolute word. You go back, look at your values, and then you start with that. What's going to get us excited? What do we want to look like in 150 years? You plug in an absolute word, 5 to 7 words. You got it? Okay, so I'm going to let you work at your tables. Tom and Tamara will be walking around, and we'll be walking around to give you some help. If you give us a little bit of background music as we're doing this, we got a little bit of noise going on here, okay? And we'll give you about 12 minutes to write your vision statement for the next 150 years. Okay, we got the microphones. Let's let some people start sharing some of what they got here. I know this table has some here. We're going to start with you guys. Yep. Yeah, go ahead and raise your hand. Yep. They're going to bring you a mic.
I just kind of put the first thing that popped in my head that kind of lined up with what I was talking about earlier, but just says all generations focus together on eternal adventure.
Yep. Eternally adventure. Good. Ashley, you want to do yours?
I changed mine. I feel like maybe I'm not a very exciting person, but my first one was always be happy and share that with others. And then it was revamped to always be happy with your position in life. Very kind of Buddhist and non-attachment.
Okay, you want to go right over here? Yep, go ahead.
I chose love God, be strong, choose joy, dare to dream, embrace the journey, serve others.
It is more than 7. Okay, I think he was going to go right here in the front row here. Yep, there you go.
Blessing every life we touch.
Yep. Good. Short and simple. Okay, who else? Right there. Yeah, go to them. I know they've got one. Yep, right there.
No, every generation seeking wisdom and serving Christ.
Okay. How about you guys here, front row here?
We wanted to create something around bettering our family and also the family bettering the community, so we chose family strong, community focused forever.
Yeah, good. Right over there. Yep. This guy here. I know he's got one.
Yeah, so I used our last name, Goins Buckland, and went with always giving back and always going beyond for service and adventure, some of the values we've made for the family.
Yeah, I like that. Always giving back, always going beyond. You guys want to do yours?
Simple, always creating a better world.
Yep. You want to do you get one? Go ahead and try it out and see.
I'm not sure if I'm any close to where I would, but here's what I came up with. Family first, always courageous and persistent.
All right. All right, anybody else? One more. How about you guys right there in the middle table?
Compounding legacy for generations.
Okay. Compounding, right? Is that what you went with? You did decide to go with. How about the back table there? Any of the back table? Yes? No? Still thinking. Okay, good. Give yourselves a big hand. Okay, you ready? So you're going to get to this one pretty quick. So this is session 4, what's my daily duty? What's my daily duty? So if family's meant to be what? Multi-generational. Why do we break apart? It's because we often don't articulate our values clearly. Why do we quit? Because we don't know the shoreline. Now we're going to see what happens if people just don't have the instruction on what they're supposed to do every single day. Now in the context, I'm going to use a business context here, but what we see oftentimes, think about it, I just was at an event last week, and this guy had built literally a $1 billion business. And he, for the first time, heard about this idea of family vision mission statement. And he literally like, wait a minute, I've been doing this for my business all these years. So I don't remember the exact statement in his business, but it was something like serve with excellence, every person, something like that. It was something pretty basic, but the idea of serving with excellence, that was their mantra. There's actually a company in Kansas City that I've seen do this probably as good as any company that I've seen. In their case, they have a vision, mission, and it is all over their building. But like they have 12 values, and then they have 2 stories in their building, and each step up to the second floor, like every other step, has their values on it. So they did all this stuff for their business, and they would have company meetings there where they'd reiterate vision and mission, but this guy's like, I never have done this for my family. And the way that we tend to think about mission is in the context of family. This is what you do in order to achieve the vision. So what would you tell your kids? Hey, every single day if you do this. So what was yours again? Blessing every life we touch. So now this is the how. How are we going to do that? Mission is the practical statement. So it's not sexy, it's not exciting. We say mission is PAM. So it's practical, actionable, and it's memorable. So like vision, we like to see these kind of statements be 5 to 7 words. Keep it short. The other way to think about mission, by the way, is you like to think about it as, this is page 14, is it should tell us how to accomplish the vision, but there, number 3, think of it as like the plaque or the t-shirt or the creed. So we do see families now that as they've gone through our workshop, they've got the baseball cap or they've got the t-shirt. Sometimes it's like 3 words. So we have one family, theirs is a t-shirt, read, heed, lead. And it's the idea that they're going to study, they're going to try to apply that study, and then they're going to live it out. But it can be that short and simple. Sometimes we have people that are educators, so it's like seek knowledge, apply knowledge. But it's these short little vignettes that you can put into, hey, this is what Grandpa, Grandma always said, did this, then we were going to fulfill that vision or we were going to live a good life. That's what you're aiming for inside of the mission statement. So these are very practical kinds of instructions. Again, you think about it in terms of page 15, by the way, here's a few more. Sit, walk, stand, read, heed, lead. TED Talks, by the way, this is theirs. TED Talks is spread ideas. So it's that kind of statement, short little instructional piece. This one should be the easiest one we hope that you would be able to do. Okay? And because we're kind of getting close to time, I'm going to let you turn you loose on this one. We'll play the music here, and then Tamara and Ted will walk around and we'll help you on this. Is this one enough? Have I given you enough here? 5 to 7 words still. This is what you're looking for. All right? Got it? Go. All right, you guys ready? Let's get out the mics and let's have a few of these. People are willing to share. Who wants to volunteer? These are helpful to hear from you all. Who wants to go? Now somebody in the back row. Oh, right in the back row, the guy right there, black shirt. He had 3 words, 3 L's.
My t-shirt says, listen, learn, and lead.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, who's next? Right there, same table, the couple there, they had move in theirs.
Bloom where you are planted.
Okay, and let's see over here, Buffalo again.
Long. But Corinthians, Paul said, always be on your guard, be strong in your faith, and be courageous.
Yep.
That kind of
Particularly like that, be courageous. Let's go over here. How about you guys? Yep, you too. Yep.
Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Yep. Okay.
I put step by step, always learning, always growing.
Yeah, good. All right. Anybody else up here? How about up here? You guys want to volunteer?
Trying to distill it all down, but I came up with lead with love and go further, or just love goes further.
Yeah, very good. All right, give yourselves a big hand. All right, home stretch here. Anybody have any questions here at this point that they want to, before we dive into the last session here? This has been super accelerated, guys, by the way. As I say, normally we do this at start at lunch, go all afternoon, and then you'd have evening to do your homework. And then we'd come back the next day and we go all the way to lunch the next day. That's what a normal workshop looks like. So you guys get an accelerated version for sure. Questions though, anybody? When you start thinking about how do we apply this? Yes. So normally what we see happen, great question. So let me see if I rephrase it so I get it correctly. Is it better to do this by yourself or with your spouse, or is it better to do this with somebody who's gone through it before? Is that really the way you're saying it? We do think it's best in this kind of environment where you can see other people working through it at the same time. The reason why I say that is, like, if I were just, like, if you told your kids, for instance, to go work on it, and you got adult kids, usually you got one spouse that dominates over another. And in this environment where you start to see people working on it together, it tends to be a little bit more collaborative. So we find that's really good. The other piece to follow on to that, again, if you have adult kids, like in your case, 19-year-old and pretty much all teenagers, right? You typically want to invite them into the process. Say, hey, here's what mom and dad have been working on. What do you think? And you let them participate in the massaging of it so they feel like they're a part. It is not wise to go home and just try to impose this on them. That's a really big no-no, okay? So other questions here y'all have? Yes, over here. Yeah, great question. So what do you do when you see a kid whose values are in the wrong direction, or maybe they're actually opposed? And so what you have to do, this is where you have to take it, you got to be careful that you're patient, first thing I'd say. Don't try to go too fast. Because sometimes we do see parents will come into this and their kids, I've got one family that I've worked inside, and the dad's over here and the son's way over here, to the point of being very angry. And they've just had to go really slow and to try to find common ground in places where, so they may not say, our values are X, but they can start to begin to articulate those areas that they do agree upon. And then actually, this next session that we're landing on, about how do you live it out, lots of times one of the first places that we see families get some agreement is on places where they'll give to, because they start to look outwards instead of just inward. But you got to go slow. That's the big thing. All right, any other questions here? Anything that's bothering you right now? What might we do? Okay, so let's try to sum up a little bit. You've done vision, mission, values. One of the short little things walking out of here that you should look to do, particularly if you've got kids that are younger, is to go ahead and publish it. At the back of the book, you've actually got the summary of it. You could write it in there. You could handwrite it, however you want to do it. Some of you may go to the step of doing like what Dawn has done, the family crest. Some of you may go all out and try to find a graphic designer. Some of you may print the picture. But the idea of being able to publish it and put it in front of everybody as a reminder. Again, if this were the family office world, one of the things that the family office world would be coming and doing is they would include some discussion around estate planning and financial planning and where are your investments and the whole bit. That becomes part of it. You do have to pay attention. It's a little bit of what Don said, and somebody asked a question about entitlement. If this is just stuff that you put on the back wall that nobody ever sees, it's not going to help your kids. You got to be able to put it in front of them and begin to talk about it and to work through it. It's a little easier when you got littler kids, the 8 and 10, because you got positional authority. You can say, here's what we got. Once you cross that line into the 11, 12, kind of depending on how mature the kid is, you don't have the same ability to impose it. So you got to invite people in, here's what we're working on. But the idea of being able to use it and to use that as a basis to be able to say, here's a story, here's an illustration, here's how we're going to do that. Get your family excited about it. That's what you want to try to start working on. Back in the back, by the way, Tamara, she's been walking around. She comes from a family business background. They just sold their family business. Some of you guys may want to go grab her, talk to her about her own experience. That was a family business. I don't know how many generations were you guys? You had the third generation working in the business. And it was your oldest son that thought he was going to be the president. So quite the story there. But how do you manage those kind of dynamics? You guys are, many of your doctors and practices, you got kids that aren't necessarily invited into a practice in the same way. So you got to look for other ways that you play this out. One of the other things we haven't talked about as much, Don mentioned the idea of what are your rhythms, weekly, monthly, annually. We like to talk about the word celebration. What's your annual celebration? What's the big festival that you're going to hold that you set apart from the rest of the year, a different time of the year? It's tougher sometimes, by the way, if you combine it with an existing holiday. But if it's that time where, whether it's the family reunion or it is, hey, the third weekend in July, we are all getting together. But it's this idea that you come together and you do a little bit around celebrating vision, mission. Here's who we are. And maybe you give out the token. We started to see families do some really neat things, like as part of that celebration, there might be the family watch. There's some neat companies out there that can do kind of the one-of-a-kind. One family, they created the unique Bible. They're the only family in the world that has their own special cover. I've looked for the same kind of symbols. So we had a whole set of family watches that had been in the family that we passed down. But it's some of those kind of ideas that you can say, here's our unique experience, how we celebrate our family. If you got that second place, the second home, okay, use that idea too. This is a weekend, or this is the 4 days of the year where we celebrate our family. Again, if you look at other cultures around the world, Jewish culture, other cultures, you'll see that there are particular celebrations where they set aside time from the day-to-day, they pull back and they say, man, here's who we are, let's celebrate. And one of your words, gratitude, they express gratitude for how much they've been given and how they can bless others. That's some simple little steps. Okay? All right, let's dive in, session 6. And let me pause. Before I do that, let me say this one last thing. Back on the back table, you'll see some of Don's materials, but you'll also see some of our materials about the workshop that we do. And then here at the end, I'll give you, there's a QR code that you can cue in. We do a digital workshop. Like if you came here and you don't have your spouse here, say, man, I'd like to catch you up to speed. It's kind of hard to communicate some of these concepts. You can participate in a digital live workshop. Some of you say, hey, we want to host a workshop, give you some of that material, but some of that's on the back table. All right, you ready? So here we go, session 5. How do we live out vision, mission, and values? And so here, the question, this is where people, we got vision, mission, values, so now what do we do? And the first thing that we actually say, the easiest place to live this out is in the idea of the generous life. So I will share just my own story in this as an illustration of this. When my son, oldest son, was 16, we had somebody that was involved in nonprofit work who had visited our house. He was heavily involved in the anti-trafficking movement, et cetera, et cetera. But she asked my 16-year-old son, so like, hey, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? Now, if you have kids, you know, when you understand that when somebody else asks that question, it's one thing for you to ask the question, what are you going to do with your life? And that's kind of what the question was. So she asked that question, my son, what drives you? What are you passionate about? And both my wife and I, this was kind of on the kitchen as kind of we're making dinner, and we're sitting there listening like, hey, what's he going to say? We didn't know what he would say exactly. And he's a real thoughtful kid, kind of an introvert, and he stops and he pauses and he says, you know, what I really love is being able to give to people in need. And we're like, whoa, okay, something stuck. 16 years old, and he's like, this is what means something to me, to be able to help other individuals. And you all have those moments when you see that, hey, something sticks in the people around you, whether it's at work or whether it's your kids or grandkids, and you think, hey, they're getting it. They're getting it. They may not have it perfectly, but they're getting it. That's one of the most powerful things that you can do. But we've seen that probably more than anything else. Generosity is the first and easiest place to start. To your question about kids that are not aligned, usually it's the giving place that you can start even before you say, hey, here's our vision, mission, values. So here's the idea. When you think of wealth, we want people to think about more than money. And so you want to define this idea of wealth as something more broad than just the financial. So you think about how do we pass on wealth as spiritual capital, intellectual, emotional, social, or financial capital, all of those. And so if you said, oh, wait a minute, if we could bankrupt one of those, what would we bankrupt? We'd probably bankrupt financial. Because if we passed on all the other forms of wealth, they'd be just fine. We could only pass on one. It's some idea of the spiritual capital, that there's something beyond yourself. And one of the hardest ones to pass on is emotional capital. How do you teach kids in particular to express their emotions? If you flip over to the next page, there's a book out there by the guy named Chip Dodd, and he talks about the 8 emotions, the call to full living, hurt, sadness, fear, guilt. The ability to express those emotions is the way that you help build community, because I can connect to people. It's the inability to express those emotions that sometimes prevent us from having that real community. Okay, I got to switch. We're moving towards wrapping this up here. Next 15 minutes. So why generosity is the first step? It's because it really is the counter to personal consumption and the focus on individual rights. This is where we started. Started with that question of what's the purpose of family, the rise and fall of nations. When we get to this place of thinking that we are wealthy, that leads to independence and the breakup of community. And the focus upon individual rights is typically the decline of a nation, but it's also the decline of a family. So, and that, by the way, is again where we're at today, this hyper-individualism place that we're at in our world today. Man, that's what's killing us. On the other hand, if you have a generous kid, you're more than likely to have a well-rounded kid. That out of all the things that we did as a family, I would say the number one thing that we did is we taught all of our kids to be givers. And we look for that. We see that in them. And again, all of our kids, I think, again, it's the most gratifying thing that we did. My oldest daughter, they were still pretty young in their marriage. And they'd gotten to a place where the car that she got out of college with needed to be replaced because they were getting ready to have kids, or they had a kid and they needed to get a van, those kind of things. And anyway, they did go buy the van. And then we asked them, like, what'd you do with your car? And they're like, well, we just gave it away. We gave away our car because this other family over here, they only had one car and she needed to be able to get herself to work. And we're like, I was sitting there thinking, well, that didn't make a lot of sense, you know. You could have sold that car and used it for the down payment on the van, those kind of things. But on the other hand, I was like, way to go. Good job. You helped somebody else. That's one of the first things. If you work on this one, again, this is one of the easiest ones to do. No matter at what stage your kid's at, how aligned you are, one of the, by far, the easiest things that you can do. And then the other thing we see here is generosity establishes the family table. A family table is a metaphor for what we used to see as family. Family table used to be the place where we could talk about the things that mattered, talk about our values, the things we disagreed with. It really was this communal kind of place. That's what we want to do. But giving is by far the easiest because now we're looking outside of ourselves. So one of the things, let's see, I'm going to flip over to page 19. Because I want to make sure we get this. There at the top of page 19, 19, your fill in the blank is look for random generosity. That's your fill in the blank. I don't have a slide for this one. Random generosity. That's your fill in the blank. This is one of the easiest things to do. Have you all heard of this concept of random generosity? The idea here is that we did this a lot with our kids. Again, it was probably the thing that made the most difference in their life. But it was the thing of where you say, give them all $100 bill or $250 at Thanksgiving. Or it doesn't have to be at a holiday, but you just say, guys, between now and Christmas, we're going to give away this money, and we just want you to find somebody in need. Find a nudge. You know, you're out going to Aldi or Walmart, and you see somebody that could maybe use some help. They're downcast, whatever it is. Look, that's the key first, is look around you, pay attention to people who may have a need. You know what that looking does? It gets you out of yourself. So now they're looking to have somebody in need, and they make the gift. Boom. And they go, here you are. Bless you. What was your vision statement? Again, blessing every life we touch. So you're looking for a way to bless, and boom, here it is. And you see these little stories of this kind of stuff. My son, my youngest son, we did one of these little exercises, and I think he'd broken it up into 250s. But he walks into a Quick Trip, and he's nudged because there's a clerk on the floor stocking stuff and whatever. He's like, I need to give her $50. So he walks up and gives her $50, and she starts weeping. I mean, just like uncontrollable weeping, and can't even talk. Now, my son's a bit stoic, and so he didn't know what to do with that, so he just left. But think about the impact on him. Just probably a few months ago, we were talking to him by phone, and he was telling us about how he would definitely have more money if it weren't for the giving that he was doing every month. And we're like, and he's a 27-year-old kid who could go buy another car, do whatever else he wanted, but his giving is changing his lifestyle on a month-by-month kind of basis. That's when you know you're starting to stick. That's one of the big things that you're looking for. That, by the way, is your next fill in the blank on page 19. You're looking for systematic giving in your children. Systematic giving in your children. Stanford, Notre Dame, some other university, they've all done studies on this. And the number one thing that you look for in your children is that if you are a systematic giver, you set aside money every single month for your giving, you are more than likely to be somebody who's going to truly bless the world. That's when you truly become generous. So it's not just the occasional pull it out and like, here it is, you know, because the offering plate came by, but it's that every month it's part of a discipline that you're looking for. So that's one of those big keys. Again, the data, the research tells it. Harvard actually did do a study where they talked about only Harvard could come up with this in sociological terms. They said that people who exhibit pro-social spending, think about what they just said, pro-social spending, helping other people, are happier and live longer than the rest of the world. So it's just proven. You just teach them that kind of systematic style of giving. It changes them and it changes the world. This kind of giving, this random giving, this systematic giving, when you see it happens, the first people who get changed by it is you. So that's what you're looking for. So how do you practice that? One of the ways, as I say, is the random generosity piece. One of the ways that you can do the systematic giving is you look at some of these ideas. You do grant certificates, matching grants, individual giving. Encourage your kids to set up their own giving account, whether that's a checking account. Some of you may be familiar with donor-advised funds. You use that as a tool, but you got to get it away from your grocery money in order to make it work. The last fill in the blank there, by the way, on that page is then, this is where some of your, what you call leverage giving. So you personally, you and your spouse personally, look for some of those big opportunities where you can make a difference. I think you guys back here, back on my right, you guys have some kind of center or something that you're doing. Maybe it's a farm, but I have seen kids or grandkids most changed when they see their family get behind a big project and they can actually see the impact. Somebody asked the question earlier about the entitlement factor that we're seeing in our society. And sometimes what we're seeing actually, one of the problems that we see in the giving space for kids today is that they don't trust institutions. So whether it's I'm going to use this, so don't take this wrong, but it's the Red Cross or some big organization, I think, how did I help anybody? It's flipping it back over when they can actually see that their giving made a difference. And then when they see you get involved in something that they can say, whoa, okay, that's what we're behind. We are behind that, and I want to be part of that. That's one of the easiest ways to have this rub off, start to carry on from generation to generation. In my side, on my dad's side of the family, we don't have a lot of great stories, but my uncle, his wife ended up getting involved in social services in the community, and now it's like a legend in the community that she lives in. Well, then her daughter and son-in-law joined too, and now they've like run the soup kitchen in the local community. Now they have the third generation that's actually involved in that very same soup kitchen. And and you know what they said? Because we saw it first in the previous two generations. That's what they got to see in you. And it's not, again, you got to be careful that it's not just money, but it's your time and your talent that you're giving. All right, making sense here? Okay, so last couple pieces here that we want to go back to is back to page 17. Here's a simple couple little exercises that we're going to give you some time to work on here. Where the giving conversation becomes difficult, back to your question over here, hey, you know, what happens if we don't agree on stuff? Giving can be an extremely divisive conversation. I'm not going to kid you. You know, how many family foundations have you seen out there that end up in a far different place? The Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Kresge Foundation. They started out here and they end up here. And you'll hear that kind of statement that, man, you know, if the founder only knew what you were doing now, they'd be rolling over their grave, or they'd be coming out of the grave to come get you. And usually, I could tell you that the number one mistake that I see among all of you, so for instance, if I looked at your trust document, or if you guys got a foundation, if I looked at all of your underlying trust documents, I can almost guarantee you that probably 99% of this room, if not 100%, that you might have good legal documents, but you have really bad legacy. So you may pass on stuff to your kids, but you will leave no guardrails to it. So you got to give some guardrails to it. What are the first set of guardrails that you provide? Vision, mission, values. If you put that in your documents, you got some guardrails on, guys, here's what we want you to do. We always say that you want your kids to be wealth creators, not wealth consumers. Wealth creators, not wealth consumers. So that's step one. Step two, this is for free here. The other big thing is, who are your trustees? So if you're accumulating some wealth, who are the next trustees? Oftentimes your kids are not the best trustees. It's usually better to look for sometimes corporate trustees. You don't want one kid, by the way, sitting over another, because that puts them in a position where they're the banker and none of the other kids like them. So that's a big mistake. But then if you do have you got to define who the trustee, what they look like. They got to have that subscription to vision, mission, values. Those are the most common mistakes that we see that families make. So if you're going to leave some money behind, then the other piece that you look to is if you're going to leave some money on the charitable side, you got to define, hey, give according to vision, mission, values, and here's the last piece. This is your little bit of work that you're going to do. You got to define your nots, and then you got to define your do's. Your do's and your don'ts. That's what you really got to define. It's the nots that actually get you in trouble as much as anything. That's why the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation kind of all went awry, is they never gave any, hey, we just don't do that. That's not who we are. So usually one of the nots is don't give to anything inconsistent with our vision, mission, values. That's one. But then from there may be particular nots that you'd say that we don't want you to pursue. And that may be any number of things that you want to be able. Now, why do we say this is important? Because it gives them some framework that inevitably, by the time you get to that, your kids, if you got 3 kids, you got 3 different ways now of how they get married to a spouse, they're living out life, different communities. Their experience of life may lead them to a different place. So if they're going to do any of it together, then the point is that if you describe their knots, then it gives them some safety, saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. Now, that doesn't mean in their personal life that they might say, oh, I'm going to do that in my personal life. But if they're going to do any giving together, then you want to have some knots. That was the mistake of the Rockefellers and the like. Now, how specific you want to be, usually we had one family that they were very specific. They didn't want to do Ducks Unlimited. Okay, so they put that in their document. Why did they not want to do that? Because they didn't like big organizations. They were a family that had always given to the little underdog in the community. So that's one that they prescribed. That was an example. But a few knots, we say that it is the right or the prerogative of the founders who established the giving to establish the knots. And we find the kids are very respectful of it. But without the knots, you leave open the doorway for conflict. Okay, so that's the first thing that you do, define your knots. So from there, the second place that you go to is, what are your guidelines? What are your do's? What are the things that we would say we would do to help, whether it's helping people in the community, helping the poor, helping the guy in prison. Some of you guys express strong faith statements. We help the church. We help people over on the mission field, whatever it is. But the do's and the don'ts is what I want you to spend just a few minutes on. And let me preface this. Here's how this starts to look. One of your number one objectives, in addition to being able to put up on the wall of your home vision, mission, values, is first family meeting. First family meeting often looks like, depending on how unified your kids are, if you got little ones, it's easier. But you can start with the place, hey, we're going to do some giving together. Now, here's some things that, man, I'd love to see us be part of. Here's some things I'd prefer that we not do. It's that simple little kind of guardrails around it that helps the conversation. Okay, you got it? So in your book, I'll be quiet for a few minutes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just spend a few minutes defining your do's and your don'ts. Got it? All right, I'll be quiet. All right, you guys ready? I know I pushed you through that one pretty quickly here, but you should have at least some framework of your do's and your don'ts. So, sum up here. Where are we ending up here? First point, family's meant to be what? Multi-generational. So if you get that idea, you get a different responsibility as you think about your kids, your family. Think about for your own life. Generations that your life can influence and impact. This last bit that we've given you about vision, mission, values, and how to live it out through a life of generosity, that's a simple step that you take. And again, I could spend a lot of time on the tools and techniques, but you guys have financial planners. I'm not going to spend that kind of time here on that. But that would be my encouragement to you, is find a way to get some money set aside, get it out of your normal grocery life money, whether it's a separate checking account, separate donor advised fund, or separate foundation. So you've got some money that's just designated for giving, and then have that family meeting, family conversation, where you can say, hey, we're the Smith family. Here's our vision, mission, values. Here's the stuff that we do because we care about helping other people. It's that simple. I know it sounds maybe simpler than some of you guys might be thinking of some of your own complications about how to pull that off. But if you do that, big stuff. The last couple, Don's going to come up here. Don, if you'll come on up, and we'll wrap up with a few other ideas. I did put up on the board here, if you want some more resources, Legacy Stone is the nonprofit that we do this under. We've got a lot of resources there, but then additionally, some of you guys maybe want to do the free online workshop. Those are usually about once a month that you can sign up for those. If you can't make the upcoming dates, then you'll be able to participate in others. But that's our big goal. Our big dream is that we can change the trajectory of family around the world. We've had some incredible opportunities. Earlier this year, I was in Australia. I'm going to Spain in March. We've got one of our team members that's going to speak in the Philippines. Tremendous interest around this idea of family and how do we change this definition to a place where we're talking about and preserving values to impact our world for generations to come. So it's been a neat journey. Everybody's got a family. Everybody wants to have a great family. So that's what we're working on. So really fun stuff. Some of you guys may say, hey, man, we need some more help. Go talk to Tamara there in the back. Go talk to Tom here. Some's like, I need something specific to my family. We're going to do a family summit with our kids, adult kids, and have that kind of gathering. So we're seeing great success in those kind of gatherings as well. All right, so Don, you want to help us wrap up here? A few tools and ideas for you, some things that we didn't have time to get into today, but like we've talked about, personality profiles, great tool. You use a few of them. We use Culture Index as one of the tools that we use.
Yeah. So yeah, a couple of things. First on that front, so 3 things I'd recommend you to think about in terms of tools. One is the 5 love languages. So you can do the assessments right on the website. You just go to 5lovelanguages, I think it's .com, but you type it in, you'll find it. They have a kids version and an adult version. It takes 5 minutes to complete. And it'll give you, at least for us, for each one, it was such an aha, like it made perfect sense. And now not only, that I know everybody's love languages, the kids know each other's, they know mom's, and we talk about them. That's a part of each of our family meetings, is talk about our love language. All right, what's mom's love language, right, which is quality time. What's Alex's, which is words of affirmation. My son's is acts of service, which is mine as well. And it just leads to a depth of knowledge and understanding and how we think about serving each other, right? I bring it up then when it's mom's birthday, all right? What's mom's love language, and what are we going to do to give her quality time, right? And so that's one really cool one. It takes a few minutes to complete. Another one is Strength Finders. You've probably heard about that before, but again, there's a kids version as well. So I think that one's like $10 or $20, and the kids just basically go through and answer these questions. Takes us like 50 questions. It takes them 20 minutes to complete. That's really cool to hear about it, for the kid themselves to get specific words and descriptions of what their strengths are. Right? It can be a huge form of affirmation, of confidence building for a child to hear words that describe them, what their strengths are, and how they can build upon those strengths. Also really powerful, and most cases it was like, wow, that makes great sense, but there were a few surprises as well for us. And
let me pause a second on that one. On Strength Finders, by the way, we do encourage the idea of doing that as an affirmation exercise, where you go through the strengths, even if you just pick one, and you affirm, hey, I see this strength in you when. Yep. Maybe you were going there. That's really helpful. We actually also encourage that you use the Azusa Pacific version of Strength Finders. Beauty. Use that one?
I have not used that one, no.
Yeah, sometimes the Gallup definition is a little harsh.
Okay.
So we like Azusa Pacific. So if you need those resources, glad to send those. Well, we encourage, by the way, for the adults that they do the full 34, which is a more expensive test, but it's only $50.
Awesome. Yeah, and then one other one, and this one we could provide to you for free if you want. You could just send us email addresses, any of us here, but email me and we'll hook you up with our HR team. It's Predictive Index. And that's one of the ones, there's a few of them, DISC, Culture Index, there's a few of them out there that are similar, Colby. But we like Predictive Index, and it takes 5 to 7 minutes to complete it. And it's similar to a DISC, if you're familiar with that one, where it tells you you across kind of 4 spectrum. For Predictive Index, A, B, C, D, and kind of, I won't spend a lot of time on it right now, but it's a great quick overview to understand each other and your behaviors as well. So those are a few. There's many other ones out there. Culture Index is a great one as well, similar to Predictive Index. No right or wrong, but just taking the time, just that simple step of taking the time to learn about each other and share and have conversation, that in and of itself is a great joy. And everybody loves to do these types of assessments and hear about themselves and I think at any age. So really encourage. The bigger your family is, the more you can get involved in it and doing it and sharing. And Bill gave some great examples of affirmation there. It's a great joy. Anything else on that on your end?
Nope, that's good.
And then the only thing I wanted to recommend is kind of 2 parts. And if you go to the next slide, whoever's controlling the screen, the 2 things, as we've kind of talked a lot about, is a lot of, building an extraordinary family is just communication. And the most common question, and if I categorize the theme of what you guys asked me, and even a lot of the questions he asked Bill, was, just the challenges. Well, how do I get my family on board? How do I get my kids on board? How do I get my spouse on board? How do we put this into action? What's the next step? So 2 things that I think are really helpful to take next steps. One is, I mentioned this earlier, this event we're hosting in June. It's in Pigeon Forge, Dollywood area. We have John Maxwell as a speaker. We have some incredible entertainers, and content for family of all ages, content on marriage, content on parenting, content for children, a lot of fun activities, entertainers they're going to enjoy. So it's going to be an easy, fun environment that no matter what their ages, they're going to enjoy, have a good time. But it's going to in a really fun way, drive a lot of this type of messaging, drive a lot of great communication, help get your family on board. There'll be different workshopping and such as well, but it'll be, I assure you, a lot of fun for all ages. And we'll do some ministry type work or philanthropy workshop activities with your kids where you can do some giving together. I'm not going to spoil what we're going to do yet, but there'll be some fun times to do service together right in the event. And that's going to be my last comment is going and doing service with your children. Bill was saying, he gave a lot of great examples of giving financially. But like you said, we all know the 3 T's, right? Time, talent, and treasure. And giving time together is really, really powerful. So whether that's going to the downtown or wherever you live and giving things out to the homeless, kind of acts of spontaneous generosity. What's the term you used? Random generosity is a great example. Going to the local food shelter and volunteering for a day, or local homeless shelter or so forth. A lot of things you can do right at home. You don't have to go overseas to do a lot of amazing giving together. A lot of great organizations you can go out and paint a house or clean up lawns or whatnot. Every town has these opportunities. But going and doing an international trip where you are going for a few days together and it pulls you out of your day-to-day whirlwind for a few days. Not many things you can do that are more powerful than investing that time together. So we can certainly connect you with some different great ministry opportunities. We're running 3 or 4 this year in Guatemala, an organization we support called Transforming Futures. Great organization because easy to get to. It's, compared to a lot of countries, we think pretty safe place to go to. And it's an organization focused on supporting orphans. In Guatemala, there's 500,000 orphans in a country of 17.5 million people. Pretty crazy. But some really great projects. We go and pour concrete floors together with your kids. A lot of fun to do the physical act of doing hard work together. Going out and building bunk beds, going and feeding at a food shelter or a food pantry. But there's a lot of them out there. But that's one that we work with. I can recommend a few other ones as well. But that can be a great way to take action. That, hey, you have a hard time getting one to sit and do this kind of planning, get out and do some service together. Can be another great step.
Yep. One other resource, we've talked about family meetings. We do have a family meeting guide. So again, if you want information on that, make sure you grab Tom or Tamara. We can send you that family meeting guide, the basics of setting up that family meeting. The idea around the mission trips, in addition to some of the international opportunity, certainly you look at some of the local opportunities as well. There's some great opportunities out there. Global Orphan Project, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They run something called a care portal. Foster care is one of the big problems in the United States today. How can you actually deliver help to families that are choosing to foster? Those are some neat ones out there like that. But those are the kind of things that you start to look at. So there you go. All right, I think we're going to be able to call it a day. So Don, if it's okay with you, would you pray for this group here and just bless them here as we go?
Sure. Before I do that, just to highlight those of you who are staying for White Coat, starts at 5 o'clock. I think that they'll be setting up right out here starting at 3. Some sort of reception get together. I know we'll be talking for a couple minutes. And then if you want to join us, we're doing a dinner event somewhere around here. We can tell you right outside the door here at 7 o'clock. So if you haven't signed up, please do. It will overbook. Oh, it's in this room? Oh, wow. All right. So it's right here. So we'll transform this room. We'll be doing a dinner here tonight. So keep that in mind. With that said, if you can join me in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for this amazing day together. Thank you for the wisdom that you provided through Bill today. What an incredible blessing he is, doing just outstanding kingdom work, bringing your wisdom to our families, which, as he said, are meant to be multi-generational. I've seen some of the work Bill's done with other families, and thank you, Lord, for using him as a tool and help him to inspire and motivate and provide the tools and wisdom and support for many of us to do the same in our families, Lord. Guide us and bless us over these next few days here together to learn a lot, to build friendships and connections, and we are just so grateful for all you do. Amen.
All right, bless you all. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.